Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The Harry Potter universe is full of vivid, memorable characters, each of whom contributes to the story in their own way, but it's the relationships that truly captivate readers. One of the most intriguing is the tense rivalry between Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy. However, it's important to remember that the films don't always faithfully follow the books. Some scenes were changed, simplified, or cut altogether. Let's take a look at the key differences between J.K. Rowling's original and the movie adaptations, and see how they shaped our perception of Draco and his relationship with Harry. Enjoy watching. Number 1. We meet Draco earlier in the book. In the movies, Malfoy is introduced on the Hogwarts platform before the sorting ceremony, where he immediately makes a snide remark about Ron. Harry declines his offer of friendship, and the antagonism between them begins right away, but in the book their encounter happens much earlier. Harry first meets Draco in Madame Malkin's robe shop in Diagon Alley. Even then, Harry feels an instant dislike. The arrogant boy with a cold tone reminds him too much of his cousin Dudley. Draco, on the other hand, has no idea who Harry is. This moment sets the tone for their future relationship long before school begins. Number 2. The duel that never happened. From the very start of the school year, tension between Harry and Draco escalates. The peak comes when Malfoy seemingly challenges Harry to a midnight duel. Harry accepts and heads to the trophy room with Ron, but it's a trap. Draco plans for Harry to get caught breaking the rules. In the end, Harry, Ron, Hermione and Neville all get involved, and while they avoid Filch, they do stumble upon the three-headed dog, Fluffy. This entire scene is missing from the film, but in the book, it marks an important step in both the development of the friendship and the growing conflict. Number 3. Harry in Nocturn Alley. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry accidentally ends up in the dark Nocturn Alley. The movie cuts this scene short, but the book gives it far more weight. There, Harry overhears a conversation between Draco and his father, Lucius Malfoy, in Borgin and Berks. Lucius scolds Draco for his poor school performance and suspicious behavior while purchasing some shady artifacts. Hidden from sight, Harry listens and gathers insights that later help him understand the Malfoys' motives and their potential connection to the Chamber of Secrets. The scene adds depth, showing Draco as more than a school bully. He's part of a much darker story. Number 4. The Quidditch World Cup. Goblet of Fire begins with a massive event, the Quidditch World Cup final. In the movie, it's shown in a few brief flashes, but the book dedicates an entire chapter to its mix of celebration and terror. During the chaos caused by Death Eaters, Draco appears and mocks Harry, Ron, and especially Hermione, calling her a mudblood. This moment highlights both his deep prejudice and his cowardice when faced with real danger, traits that help define him in the books. Number 5. Draco as Rita Skeeter's informant. Rita Skeeter is unpleasant in both versions, but the book reveals a surprising alliance. Draco has been one of her informants all along. He feeds her gossip and retells events from Harry's life, helping her craft scandalous stories. This detail adds complexity to Draco's character. He's not just running his mouth in the hallways, he's actively working to undermine Harry using the tools available to him. Number 6. Draco and the fake Dementor. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Draco tries to outdo himself in scheming. As Harry prepares for an important Quidditch match, Draco and his friends disguise themselves in cloaks and pretend to be Dementors, hoping to scare Harry into fainting again. But the plan fails. Harry casts a Patronus, sees through the trick, and wins the match. This scene is absent from the film, but in the book, it shows Draco's sneaky tactics, and another instance where he's outmatched. Number 7. Draco's sinister curse on the train. Harry shouldn't have stayed in the luggage rack, but curiosity burned stronger than caution. He watched Draco from under the invisibility cloak, convinced the boy was up to something darker than school rivalry. And he was right, but he didn't expect what came next. Draco struck fast. Petrificus totalis! The spell hit. Harry collapsed, paralyzed. Then Draco kicked him hard, again and again. The book says he stamped hard on Harry's face and left him crumpled on the floor, bleeding under the cloak. It wasn't just anger, it was fury, humiliation, fear, all turned violent. Malfoy didn't gloat, he didn't make a speech. He left Harry lying helpless, alone and unseen. If Nymphadora Tonks hadn't found him, bloodied, unconscious, barely breathing, Harry might not have made it to Hogwarts at all. That moment marked a shift. Draco wasn't playing games anymore. He was at war, and for the first time, Harry wasn't the one in control. Number 8, Harry and Draco, the battle in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Draco was hiding, not in a classroom or the dungeons, but in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the one place no one ever looked. He stood over the sink, trembling, his reflection pale and drawn. The weight of Voldemort's mission had cracked him. When Harry found him there, things spiraled fast. Words turned into wands, and in a flash of anger, Harry shouted a spell he barely understood. Sectumsempra! Blood exploded across the tiles. Draco collapsed, clutching his chest, gasping. The bathroom filled with red and with Myrtle's screams. Murder! Murder in the bathroom! It wasn't a duel anymore. It was a disaster. Harry stared in horror at what he'd done. He didn't want this. He didn't want Draco bleeding on the floor. He dropped to his knees, frozen, until Snape burst in and shoved him aside, saving Draco with wordless spells. The film made it look clean, sharp, just another fight. But the book shows the terror, not just in Draco, but in Harry too. The gash was deep, and blood poured from it, splattering the tiles. This wasn't a heroic victory. It was a moment of raw fear, a moment that left them both scarred, one physically, the other with guilt. And after that day, neither of them looked at the other the same way again. Number 9, Malfoy and the Astronomy Tower, a tragedy of choice. On the Astronomy Tower, Draco Malfoy stands with his wand raised. Dumbledore, weakened and unarmed, waits, not with fear, but with sadness. He sees what Draco is, a boy, cornered, desperate. The silence between them is heavy, and in that silence Draco trembles. He doesn't want to kill, he's never killed. The wand shakes in his hand. I have to do it. He'll kill me. He'll kill my family. That's what Draco says in the book. His voice is breaking. It isn't defiance, it's a cry. Voldemort didn't give him a choice. He gave him a death sentence disguised as a mission. Kill the headmaster, or your family pays the price. It was never bravery. It was blackmail. Dumbledore doesn't beg. He pleads with understanding. Draco, you're not a killer. And in that line, J.K. Rowling gives Draco something no other adult had ever offered him: mercy. But time runs out. The door bursts open. Snape steps forward, and the spell that leaves his lips ends the moment, ends Dumbledore, ends Draco's chance to decide for himself. The film shows hesitation, the book shows torment. It's not a villain at work, it's a child forced into the darkest corner of the war. After that night, Draco is never the same. He's not proud, he's not triumphant, he's broken. And from that moment on, he stops pretending, because he's seen what true fear is and what it costs. Number 10, Malfoy's wand changed everything. The Elder Wand was never loyal to Voldemort. That's what killed him in the end. The films skim over it, but the book explains clearly the wand's true master was Harry. Not because he stole it, not because he killed for it, but because he disarmed Draco Malfoy. It happened at Malfoy Manor. Harry wrestled Draco's wand from his hand. Not the Elder Wand, just Draco's own, but wands know loyalty. And the Elder Wand, hidden in Dumbledore's tomb, felt the shift. It turned to Harry quietly, invisibly. Even Voldemort, for all his power, couldn't force it to obey. The wand chooses the wizard, Ollivander once said. In this case, it chose Harry without him even realizing it. Later, when Harry stands in the Great Hall and faces Voldemort one last time, he tells him the truth. The wand's allegiance lies with me, Harry says, because I disarmed Draco. It sounds absurd to Voldemort, but it's the final move on the chessboard. A simple, overlooked detail, the wand, taken in a moment of desperation, decides the fate of the wizarding world. Draco never meant to give Harry that power. He didn't even know he had it. But in losing his wand, he unknowingly became the key to Voldemort's defeat. One quiet moment, one stolen wand, and the greatest dark wizard in history fell not to hatred, but to loyalty that chose another master. Number 11, Silent Reconciliation on Platform 934. 19 years later, the war was over, but memories still lingered. On Platform 934, Harry Potter stood with Ginny watching their children board the Hogwarts Express. Around him, the air was full of noise and excitement. And then he saw Draco Malfoy, older, paler, standing with his wife Astoria and their son, Scorpius. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Draco met Harry's eyes and Harry nodded. Draco nodded back. It was a small gesture, quiet, almost invisible to the crowd. But it carried the weight of years. They had once tried to destroy each other. Now they stood as fathers, survivors. Neither man smiled, but there was no malice in that glance, only understanding. They had both lost, both changed. The hatred that once defined them had burned out somewhere between a curse in a corridor and a hand reaching through fire. In the book, this moment is sharp and subtle. Rowling writes, Draco gave a curt nod and turned away. That was enough. No apology, no forgiveness spoken aloud, but in that simple motion lived everything unsaid, all the battles, the silence, the choices. It was not friendship, it was peace. And sometimes peace is more powerful than reconciliation. Number 12, Draco, almost switched sides. Inside the room of requirement, everything burns. The cursed fire, fiend fire, roars like a living monster, swallowing centuries of hidden secrets. Draco Malfoy runs, not with confidence, not with purpose. He runs because he doesn't know what else to do. He didn't cast the fire. Vincent Crabbe did, foolishly and fatally, but Draco's hesitation began long before the flames. When he stepped into that room with Crabbe and Goyle, he didn't charge at Harry. He didn't draw his wand first. He hung back, watching, waiting, almost afraid. Draco calls out to Harry, not with venom, but with something that almost sounds like panic. "Don't kill me, Potter! Don't kill me!" There's no fight in his voice, just fear. He doesn't want this. He never did. The mission to kill Dumbledore broke him. Now Voldemort's war is crumbling around him, and Draco, son of Death Eaters, is stuck in a world where no side wants him, and every choice feels wrong. He doesn't fight for the Dark Lord. He barely fights at all. The only thing he truly wants is to survive. Harry sees it, even through the smoke and fire. He sees the boy who once laughed at blood status now choking on his own helplessness. And when the fiend fire begins to devour the room, Harry makes a decision. He turns his broom toward Draco and pulls him out of the flames. Not because they're friends, not because Draco deserves it, but because Harry is who Draco could never be. Someone who chooses mercy over revenge. The films skip past the doubt, past the almost surrender. On screen, Draco is little more than a background coward. But the book tells another story. One where his silence speaks louder than spells. One where his failure to act becomes the closest thing to a redemption he's ever allowed. In those final moments, Draco doesn't fight for Harry, but he doesn't fight against him either, and in a war of absolutes, that alone makes him different. That alone saves his life. Number 13, the arrest of Lucius Malfoy and the fall of family pride. Lucius Malfoy's downfall began in the Department of Mysteries. After leading a group of Death Eaters in an attempt to steal the prophecy from the Ministry of Magic, he was captured and sent to Azkaban. It wasn't just a blow to the Dark Lord's plans. It shattered the image of the Malfoy family. Once regarded as pure-blood aristocracy, untouchable and powerful, the Malfoys were now disgraced. The Daily Prophet didn't scream the scandal, but whispers filled every hallway at Hogwarts. And Draco heard them all. Draco returned to school changed. Gone was the smug boy who swaggered through corridors like they belonged to him. Now he walked faster, spoke less. His usual jabs at Harry lacked their former venom. There's a moment in Half-Blood Prince when Harry spies Draco alone in a train compartment, wiping his eyes. He's not crying, Ron says, confused. But Harry sees it. He is. That brief scene is never in the film, but in the book, It cracks open the truth. Draco wasn't just plotting dark things, he was crumbling under them. The loss of Lucius hit harder than public disgrace. At home, the Malfoy Manor was no longer a place of pride. It had become Voldemort's headquarters. Lucius, once a man of influence, was now a broken shadow trying to win back favor. Draco, just 16, was forced to become the family's last hope. Voldemort gave him an impossible task: kill Albus Dumbledore. As Severus Snape later says, the Dark Lord believes that punishing Draco for Lucius's failures will be the ultimate lesson. Draco wasn't ready, but refusal wasn't an option. All of it stemmed from that night in the Department of Mysteries. One decision, one failure, and the Malfoy legacy began to rot from within. The boy who once mocked others for weakness had to hide his own fear in the shadows of a collapsing house, and no amount of pride could protect him from the weight of his father's fall. Number 14. Moaning, Myrtle and Draco. An unexpected connection. Draco Malfoy was never meant to be a tragic figure. From the very first pages of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, he was the sneering foil to Harry's quiet courage, a boy moulded by privilege, arrogance, and the expectation of dominance. Yet by the time readers reach Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the 6th installment of J.K. Rowling's saga, that confident mask begins to crumble. And curiously, it is not his housemates, his family, or even his professors who witness the disintegration. It is Moaning Myrtle, the ghost of a lonely girl killed decades before, who becomes his sole confidant. This peculiar bond, barely hinted at in the films, offers a glimpse into Draco's inner torment and redefines our understanding of him. It begins not with a declaration, but with avoidance. As Harry, Hermione, and Ron speculate over Draco's increasingly erratic behavior, he becomes elusive, secretive, and isolated. He vanishes from the Great Hall, skips meals, and, more than once, is seen disappearing into the shadows of the castle. But it is in the girls' bathroom, a place few students willingly venture into, where Draco finds his refuge. And it is there, amidst the cracked mirrors and dripping taps, that he meets Moaning Myrtle. Moaning Myrtle, the eternally tearful ghost of a former Ravenclaw student, is known for haunting the second-floor girls' lavatory, drowning in self-pity and reminiscing about her unjust death. Most students find her insufferable, a wailing nuisance to be avoided. Yet for Draco, she becomes something else entirely. Someone who listens, someone who doesn't judge, someone who, in her own spectral way, understands what it means to be lost, to be burdened with pain too heavy for a young heart. This relationship is never overtly spelled out in large sections of dialogue, but the clues are there. In Chapter 21 of The Half-Blood Prince, The Unknowable Room, Harry follows Draco on the Marauder's map and notices his dot disappearing in the vicinity of the second-floor bathroom. What is Draco doing there? Over and over again. The answer comes later, when Harry confronts Draco and discovers him in a vulnerable, broken state. Myrtle is hovering beside him, her transparent form radiating an odd mixture of concern and pride. "He's not well," she says to Harry. "He's been crying." This moment, quiet and overlooked, reveals something far deeper than a mere hiding place. Myrtle knows Draco's suffering. She has seen it. She has felt it. What drives a boy like Draco to seek comfort from a ghost? Not friendship, for he has Crabbe and Goyle, ever loyal. Not love, for he has Pansy Parkinson, constantly doting. Not even family or need, for he bears the heavy Malfoy name, weighted with expectation and fear. But Myrtle, eternally frozen in her own grief, becomes a mirror to his pain. She, too, was once a young student who was dismissed, mocked, and eventually destroyed by forces beyond her control. In Draco, she sees her own reflection, not in arrogance or cruelty, but in suffering. Draco, though never shown shedding his pride, is revealed in the books to be unraveling. The mission Voldemort has given him, to assassinate Albus Dumbledore, is far beyond the grasp of a 16-year-old boy. Though he tries to play the part of the hardened Death Eater, his soul is at war with itself. "I have to do it," he whispers to Myrtle, who later recounts these words to Harry. It is a cry of obligation, not desire. This is not the boy who once revelled in the torment of others. This is a child being crushed under a weight he cannot bear. J.K. Rowling does not linger long on these moments between Myrtle and Draco, but they are among the most poignant in the 6th book. In them we see a Draco stripped of artifice, no sneers, no smugness, no taunts, only fear, only desperation, only a ghost who listens. Their encounters take place away from the noise and chaos of the world, in a bathroom no one enters, beneath the gaze of no professors or peers. It is a secret sanctuary where truth is laid bare. Myrtle's role in the saga has always been tinged with melancholy, but in the Half-Blood Prince her presence becomes almost maternal. Though still given to melodrama, she does not mock Draco's tears or expose him. She shields him, emotionally and literally. "I promised I wouldn't tell anyone," she says when Harry demands answers. For the first time in her ghostly existence, she has found someone whose pain makes her feel useful. She is no longer merely the victim of Tom Riddle's cruelty. She becomes the witness to another young soul being devoured by darkness. This unexpected connection challenges everything we think we know about Draco. We are used to seeing him as the villain, the antagonist who mocks Harry, insults Hermione, and tries to sabotage everything good. But Rowling hints that beneath the cultivated cruelty is a frightened, cornered boy, the kind of boy who breaks down not in front of his friends but in a broken bathroom, whispering confessions to a ghost no one sees. It is this duality of outer menace and inner anguish that makes Draco one of the series' most complex figures. Myrtle, too, finds redemption in this relationship. For so long she has been cast as comic relief, the moaning phantom who bursts from toilets and wails at inopportune moments. But here she becomes essential. She becomes the only one who truly sees Draco. Not his parents, not Snape, not even Dumbledore. It is Myrtle who recognizes the tremble in his voice, the crack in his resolve, the glistening streaks on his pale cheeks. And in this recognition, she becomes something more than a ghost. She becomes his confessor. Number 15, the hidden room of requirement. There are many rooms in Hogwarts that carry the weight of memory, but few are as mysterious or protean as the room of requirement. For those who seek, it appears. For those who are desperate, it listens. And on one desperate day during the Battle of Hogwarts, it became a crucible for redemption, destruction, and a kind of silent reconciliation, a moment that, in the end, revealed far more than what Harry Potter came there to find. Harry wasn't sure what shape the room would take when he paced before the blank stretch of wall for the 3rd time. He had come seeking the hiding place of Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem, one of Voldemort's final Horcruxes. The door that formed before him led not to a chamber of elegance or ceremony, but to a towering landfill of forgotten secrets, a cathedral of broken things hidden by generations of students. This was the room of hidden things, a hidden sanctum within a room that already defied logic. The place was labyrinthine. Old textbooks, shattered wands, cabinets with doors that screamed when opened, and even a vanishing cabinet, perhaps the very one Draco Malfoy had once used, loomed in shadows. Harry's breath misted in the cold air, though the room was not truly cold. It was the breath of tension, of pursuit. They were not alone. Somewhere between the mounds of junk, danger was slinking closer. It was Draco Malfoy who had followed Harry not alone, but flanked by the ever-loyal Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle. And though they moved together, their unity had begun to fray. The war had peeled away layers of pretense, leaving behind something more raw, more uncertain. Malfoy's wand hand trembled. His voice, once sharp and certain, wavered in the thick air of the room. "I said I'd bring you to him," he managed to say, but there was no conviction behind it. Malfoy's presence in the room was not the act of a predator hunting prey. He had always been caught in a web between obligation and instinct, and this moment was no different. His face bore the thin cracks of internal war. A child raised on ideology now shaken by the cost of loyalty. Crabbe, however, burned with reckless rage. He had found power in fear and expressed it with violence. When he summoned the Fiendfire, it was not to intimidate, but to destroy. Fiendfire, that uncontainable magical blaze, had always been forbidden. It did not merely burn, it consumed, it hunted, it lived. When Crabbe released it, he lost control almost instantly. "He's gone completely mental," Ron had muttered earlier. But now that madness had taken shape, in the form of fire serpents and burning beasts that clawed their way across the mounds of forgotten things, devouring memories and relics alike. As the fire rose, it cast long, leaping shadows on Malfoy's pale face. For a moment, time fractured. Harry could see everything that had brought them here. Years of rivalry, insults, near-duels and cold silences. But now Malfoy's eyes were not filled with malice, only fear. Not fear of Harry, but fear of the thing Crabbe had unleashed and of the madness devouring the room. The flames were coming for all of them, and in that instant the war between them was irrelevant. The Diadem was still within reach, perched atop a bust of an old warlock, which itself was balanced precariously atop a broken cabinet. Harry snatched it, almost as an afterthought. He had come for this cursed relic, but something else demanded his attention now. Survival, and more importantly, salvation. Malfoy was not an enemy anymore. He was a boy caught in the fire. Crabbe did not make it. The fire claimed him quickly, leaving nothing behind. And in those next critical seconds, Harry made a choice that was neither tactical nor required. He turned back. Malfoy had slipped, disoriented by the flames and smoke, his balance lost among the tilting towers of debris. Harry didn't hesitate. He reached out and pulled him up, arm straining against the weight and heat. Goyle followed, barely clinging to Harry's broomstick as Ron and Hermione helped guide them through the chaos. It was an act that never made it into the proclamations of heroism. No statue commemorated Harry's rescue of Malfoy. But that moment carved itself into something deeper than legacy. It became a pivot in the long arc of their relationship. For Malfoy, being saved by Harry Potter during the final war, in a room that once served as a sanctuary for him, was a transformation more profound than any spell. In the films, the moment is condensed, almost casual. There is fire, there is flight, there is rescue, but the book's rendering is far more visceral. J.K. Rowling's description allows the reader to feel the weight of the burning air, to taste the acrid smoke, and to sense the gravity of a decision made in the heart of chaos. Harry wheeled around, sprang for Malfoy, and seized the back of his robes, the book reads. A simple sentence, and yet it breaks the chain of everything that came before it. Malfoy's silence afterwards speaks volumes. He does not thank Harry, he does not offer explanation or apology, but he looks at him differently. Their animosity had been stripped raw by the fire, and in its place was a strange new alloy, understanding, if not friendship. And Harry, too, seemed to know there would be no need for acknowledgement. The act itself had been enough. The room of requirement, so often a place of personal comfort or escape, became on that day a stage for something much more sacred, transformation. The fire had forced a reckoning, not only with mortality, but with identity. Malfoy had come to fulfill a mission for the Dark Lord. He left not only empty-handed, but rescued by the very boy he had once scorned. And Harry, the chosen one, the boy who lived, chose compassion over vendetta. Number 16, Harry saves Draco twice. The first time Harry Potter truly sees Draco Malfoy not as a rival, not as an annoyance, but as a fellow human being in mortal danger. They are not at Hogwarts anymore. The castle is crumbling around them, its centuries-old stones scorched by cursed flames. The room of requirement, once a sanctuary of hidden things, has become a death trap, engulfed by the fiend fire conjured by Vincent Crabbe, a curse he never fully understood. In that moment, Malfoy is not the smirking boy who mocked Hermione's bloodline, nor the teenager who plotted Dumbledore's murder. He is just a terrified boy suspended in midair, clutching at nothing, his feet kicking above a pit of magical fire that devours everything it touches. Harry, with a broom beneath him and seconds to spare, does not hesitate. He dives through the choking heat, fire licking at his robes, and seizes Draco's wrist. It is not the act of a Gryffindor rescuing a friend. It is a choice made in defiance of hatred, in defiance of history. And he knew as he flew that he had made his decision. He was not going to let Malfoy die. Deathly Hallows, Chapter 31. The fire roars behind him, greedy and wild, yet Harry holds on, dragging Draco towards safety. It is not a triumphant rescue, it is raw, desperate and honest. This is the first salvation, the one most fans remember, but it is not the only time Harry Potter chooses Draco Malfoy's life over vengeance. There is a second moment, quieter, but far more dangerous in consequence. It happens not in a flaming room, but in a forest drenched in shadows. The Forbidden Forest, where Voldemort has assembled his followers for the final blow. Harry has willingly walked to death, the resurrection stone clutched in his hand, his heart heavy with all he leaves behind. He offers himself, unarmed and unafraid, and accepts death. But death does not take him, not truly. Voldemort fails to understand the magic of love, as always. And when Harry returns, silent and invisible beneath the invisibility cloak, he witnesses the chaos as Voldemort's army sweeps toward Hogwarts. He sees Death Eaters breaking ranks, the Order faltering, the Centaurs charging. It is then that Harry sees Draco again, this time not dangling above flames but caught in the middle of a battlefield. Lucius and Narcissa are there, their pale faces frantic, shouting for their son. In the confusion, a curse is flung toward Draco. No one sees it, no one except Harry. He raises his wand. No one knows it was him, but it was. In the book's own words, Harry saw Malfoy running back into the fray. A jet of red light flew past him. Harry's wand moved instinctively and the spell missed Draco by inches. Deathly Hallows, Chapter 36. A choice made again, not by accident, but by instinct, a choice that echoes the same truth as before. Harry refuses to let Draco die, even if no one would blame him for looking away. These moments are not random acts of heroism. They are deeply intentional, rooted in the very core of who Harry is. He has every reason to let Draco suffer. Draco, after all, has spent years antagonizing him. He has insulted his friends, tried to sabotage him, and even took the dark mark, aligning himself with the enemy. But Harry does not weigh worthiness when he acts. He never has. That is what makes him different. Where others see enemies, Harry sees people. And in Draco he sees someone who has been led astray, yes, but who still deserves a chance to live. The Fiendfire scene in the Room of Requirement was not originally in the movies with the weight it carried in the books. In the film, Harry grabs Draco with quick efficiency, almost like a reflex, but in the book there is tension, conflict, and decision. Harry could have chosen to fly away. Ron even questions the effort. "If we die for them, I'll kill you, Harry." Deathly Hallows, Chapter 31. It is not a friendly jest, it is a genuine frustration, like that Harry once again chooses mercy over pragmatism. But that's what makes Harry Harry. He does not act for glory, nor does he seek the approval of others. He acts because he knows what's right. In the forest scene, Harry is no longer acting as a boy. He is a man who has faced death and returned. His soul is whole. He does not reveal himself immediately. He watches, absorbs, makes choices without applause. Protecting Draco a second time is a quiet act, unseen by everyone. There is no reward, no witness, only Harry, his conscience, and the battlefield. This dual act of rescue is a mirror to Voldemort's philosophy. Where Voldemort discards lives like broken tools, Harry preserves them, even those of his enemies. Voldemort rewards loyalty with fear, punishes failure with death, and expects obedience without love. Harry operates differently. Even when Draco stood over Dumbledore with a wand, shaking, terrified, it was Harry who later recognized the boy's despair. He was lowering his wand. He didn't want to do it. Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 27. Harry saw through the mask, he always did. What makes these two rescues powerful is not just the action but the context. Draco never once apologizes to Harry. He does not express gratitude, nor does he acknowledge the debt. Even in the epilogue they nod to each other, that's all. And yet Harry's acts were not contingent on Draco's remorse. They were rooted in Harry's moral compass. He did what was right, not what was easy, and certainly not what was deserved. There is something fundamentally redemptive about these scenes, not for Draco perhaps. His arc remains one of silent retreat rather than open repentance. But for the reader, they force us to confront what forgiveness looks like. It is not always mutual. It does not always end in friendship. Sometimes it is simply choosing not to become what you hate. Harry had every chance to become hardened by war, to close his heart, to let vengeance guide him. But he didn't. Number 17, after the war, the fate of the Malfoys, the Battle of Hogwarts marked the end of a dark era, but it also left behind a trail of broken alliances, shattered ideals, and families forced to reckon with what they had supported or failed to prevent. Among these were the Malfoys, a name once spoken with reverence or fear, now carrying a heavy weight of suspicion, guilt, and quiet transformation. Their survival was not merely a consequence of escape, but a choice to change, made not on battlefields but in silent acts of defiance and reluctant mercy. In the films, the Malfoys fade into the background, spared judgment and allowed to live, their faces slightly aged in a final scene on platform 9 3/4. But J.K. Rowling's written words offer more than this brief visual farewell. In the books, the truth is more intricate. The Malfoys, Lucius, Narcissa, and Draco did not fight for Voldemort in the final moments. They did not raise their wands to defend his cause. Instead, they fled, not out of cowardice alone, but because their loyalties had begun to erode from within, cracked by fear, love, and the harrowing realization of what the Dark Lord truly was. Narcissa Malfoy's quiet betrayal became one of the war's most decisive moments. When she walked into the Forbidden Forest, sent to confirm Harry Potter's death, she knelt beside his seemingly lifeless form. She could have announced his condition to Voldemort. She could have sealed Harry's fate. Instead, she whispered, "Is Draco alive?" And when Harry answered yes, she lied to the Dark Lord. She told him Harry was dead. That single lie, born not of political cunning but of a mother's desperate love, saved Harry's life and changed the course of the battle. Narcissa knew that the only way she would be permitted to enter Hogwarts and find her son was as part of the conquering army, Rowling later explained. This was not heroism in the traditional sense. Narcissa did not join the Order. She did not duel Death Eaters. She acted for her family alone. Yet in that moment, she became more than a Malfoy. She became a mother who chose love over allegiance, and for that she was forgiven. After the war, the Ministry did not prosecute the Malfoys, though they had supported Voldemort, housed him, and profited under his regime. Their inaction during the battle and Narcissa's intervention served as a form of redemption. Lucius, by contrast, emerged from the war a broken man. The once proud aristocrat who had strutted through the Ministry and lorded over the wizarding elite was now diminished. His wand, once a symbol of his strength, had been taken by Voldemort, used and discarded. His wealth could not shield him from disgrace. In the aftermath of the Dark Lord's defeat, Lucius did not return to political power. He did not reclaim his seat on any governing council. He withdrew from public life, a recluse in Malfoy Manor, his voice no longer echoing through the corridors of wizarding society. For Draco, the war ended not with celebration, but confusion. At 17, he had witnessed his home become a prison, his parents reduced to servants, and himself turned into a reluctant tool. The elder Malfoys had hoped Draco would rise through the ranks of the new world Voldemort promised. Instead, he found himself tasked with the impossible, murdering Albus Dumbledore. He failed, not because he lacked cunning, but because he was not a killer. When the moment came on the Astronomy Tower, he lowered his wand. The weight of expectation and dread crushed the boy who had once boasted in corridors and insulted classmates with cruel precision. Rowling paints a subtle portrait of Draco after the war. He is not jailed, not celebrated, but left alone. He marries Astoria Greengrass, a fellow Slytherin whose views on blood purity were milder, more tolerant. Their union was not one of strategic advantage, but of mutual understanding. Two people shaped by trauma, seeking peace rather than prominence. Draco married a young woman named Astoria, who had undergone a similarly profound transformation, Rowling revealed. They decided to raise their son Scorpius, free from prejudice. This choice to raise Scorpius apart from the old ways marked a quiet rebellion. Draco no longer spoke of pure-blood supremacy. He no longer walked the halls of the ministry or advocated for old values. He built a life of distance. In the cursed child we see the fruit of that life, a father who, though reserved, adores his son and fears for him not as a Malfoy heir, but as a vulnerable child growing up in a world still full of expectations and whispers. It is in these whispers that the Malfoys still live. They are not heroes, they are not villains. They are a family caught in the turning tide of history. Their crimes are not erased, but they are also not condemned. Narcissa's act saved the boy who lived. Draco's refusal to kill saved a headmaster and himself. Even Lucius, in his collapse, serves as a reminder that power without conviction crumbles under the weight of reality. When Harry testifies at their trials, he does not speak in anger. He acknowledges Narcissa's lie. He confirms that Draco, though involved, was never fully committed to Voldemort's cause. His words help tip the balance. The court does not forget the past, but it chooses to believe in the possibility of change. The Malfoys' post-war life is one of caution. They attend events rarely, and when they do so with measured smiles and short appearances. Their manor remains grand, but its doors no longer open for feasts celebrating bloodlines or connections. Instead, it becomes a quiet place, a house of memories, some beautiful, many haunted. Draco's relationship with other Hogwarts alumni is cold but not hostile. He and Harry never become friends, but a mutual respect grows. They are bound by war, by shared trauma, and by their sons, who attend the same school, share the same train, and eventually share the same battles of adolescence. When Scorpius faces rumors at school that he is the son of Voldemort, that his bloodline is cursed, it is Draco who stands behind him, not to threaten or intimidate, but to shield. In the cursed child, we glimpse this father, older and gentler. "I never wanted you to have my life," he tells Scorpius. "Not my name, not my history. I want you to choose your path." These are not the words of the boy who once mocked Hermione Granger for her blood. They are the words of a man who has seen where hatred leads. Astoria's death deepens Draco's solitude. She had been his anchor. With her gone, he becomes more withdrawn. But he does not return to old ways. Instead, he focuses on Scorpius. For Draco, fatherhood is redemption, not in grand gestures, but in quiet mornings, patient explanations, and a refusal to let his past define his son's future. The wizarding world, too, has changed. The ministry no longer tolerates blood purity rhetoric. New laws ensure equality, and while prejudice does not vanish overnight, it fades. The Malfoy name still carries weight, but it is a complicated weight. Some whisper of betrayal, others of bravery. Most, perhaps, simply choose to forget. And yet forgetting is not the same as healing. For Draco, the ghosts of the war remain. He visits his mother often. Narcissa, older now, spends her days in the garden, away from politics and news. Her only concern is family. Lucius rarely leaves his study, surrounded by books he no longer reads. They are a family that chose survival over legacy, and in doing so found something closer to peace than power ever offered. The Malfoys' story is not one of redemption in the traditional sense. They did not save the world, but they saved themselves, not all at once, not with glory, but piece by piece, through lies told in forests, through wands not raised, through children raised differently. In the end, perhaps that is enough. Not all battles are fought with spells. Some are fought in silence, in restraint, in choosing not to follow a path, even when that path has been laid out since birth. Draco's greatest act of courage may not have been what he did during the war, but what he chose after, to walk away from everything he was taught to believe. J.K. Rowling said of Draco, "He grew up in a very closed community and had a lot of bigoted beliefs instilled in him from an early age, but he changed, slowly, painfully. That, to me, is far more real than someone flipping sides in an instant. This is the truth that defines the Malfoys after the war. Their change was not theatrical, it was not sudden, but it was real. The legacy of the Malfoys is no longer written in stone, but in choices. Narcissa's lie, Draco's silence, Astoria's influence, Harry's mercy. Together, these shaped a future different from the one Voldemort promised them. In that quiet difference lies their freedom. Number 18, Harry, defends Draco in front of everyone. The fire had barely retreated from the room of requirement when the trio stumbled out, breathless, shaken, and covered in soot. The battle raged through the castle like a storm in full fury, but in that suspended moment between escape and re-entry into chaos, something unexpected happened, something quiet, yet thunderous in meaning. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, had just pulled Draco Malfoy and Blaise Zabini out of certain death, and now stood, scorched and bleeding, defending the same Draco who had once tried to see him dead. This wasn't just an act of heroism, it was a declaration. A line had been drawn, and Harry had made it clear that Draco Malfoy stood on the right side of it, or at least that he hadn't crossed into true evil. The words came like stone through glass, silencing both doubt and noise. He was in the room of requirement, he wasn't fighting for them. That was it. No lecture, no plea, just a sentence heavy with moral weight and absolute conviction. Ron's face had twisted in confusion. Hermione looked as though she wanted to question him. But Harry didn't yield. He had seen something they hadn't, something Draco himself likely hadn't even seen in his own reflection. There, amid fire and crumbling stone, Harry recognized that Draco's soul had stopped short of true darkness. He had chosen fear, not cruelty, cowardice, not malice. And that to Harry made all the difference. This moment cannot be divorced from its history. It comes after years of animosity, after countless hexes exchanged in corridors, after betrayal and blood and broken trust. Draco had once tried to hand Harry over to Voldemort at Malfoy Manor. He had cursed Katie Bell. He had nearly killed Dumbledore, albeit without ever meaning to. And yet Harry saw through it all. He understood what few others did. Draco had been a pawn, frightened and desperate, but never wholly willing to serve the darkness he had inherited. To defend Draco publicly in front of Ron and Hermione in the midst of war was to reclaim the boy from the clutches of the narrative that had swallowed him whole. In this, Harry acted as both witness and judge, not to excuse Draco's actions, but to affirm his humanity. It was a rare moment of mercy in a world consumed by vengeance. And it was precisely this moment that elevated Harry beyond the role of soldier or savior. It made him just. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione had entered the room of requirement to retrieve the diadem of Ravenclaw, they had not expected to find Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle waiting to ambush them. The trap had been set, but its execution failed. As the cursed fiend fire spiraled out of control, Harry made the choice that few would have made. He went back for Draco. He could have left him. The logic of war would have forgiven him. But Harry didn't function by the logic of war. Instead, he acted from the logic of life. The moment Draco slipped from the pile of broken cabinets and blazing debris, Harry's hand reached out. He saved him. No fanfare, no triumph, just instinct. And that instinct was later echoed in his words. He wasn't fighting for them. There was no need to explain further. Harry saw a soul in crisis and offered it reprieve. It's not just about who Draco was in that moment, it's also about who Harry had become. Throughout the series, Harry had been taught again and again that choices define a person more than abilities or background. Dumbledore had said it, Sirius had echoed it. But here, Harry lived it. He didn't merely repeat the mantra, he enacted it in the midst of peril when it mattered most. There is something profoundly biblical about that moment, almost Christ-like. The enemy, bloodied and disgraced, is raised from the fire by the hand of the one he scorned. It's not forgiveness spoken, it's forgiveness done. And in doing so, Harry reclaims not only Draco's life, but a fragment of their shared past. The corridor duels, the taunts, the shattered friendships of their youth. All that history folds into that single act of mercy. Ron, brave but often binary in his view of people, doesn't see it at first. He views Draco as the coward who let Death Eaters into the castle, as the boy who watched others suffer while pretending not to care. Hermione, empathetic but cautious, sees nuance, but she too hesitates. It is Harry who moves forward, not just physically but morally, emotionally. He declares with full clarity that there is a threshold Draco never crossed. This moment stands in stark contrast to the rest of the battle. Outside, lines are clear. Good versus evil. The Order versus the Death Eaters. Wands raised and spells flying. But here, in this moment between friends and former enemies, the line blurs. Harry redraws it not by words, but by choice. In a story filled with deaths and sacrifices, this is an act of preservation. What makes Harry's defense of Draco so significant is its public nature. He could have whispered his reasoning to Hermione, justified it in private, but he didn't. He told them plainly, almost defiantly, in front of others. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about telling the world that some people don't deserve to be cast out, even if they've walked close to the edge. The war had taught Harry many things: grief, endurance, and the weight of impossible decisions, but it also taught him mercy. Draco's name could have been forgotten in the rubble of Hogwarts, reduced to whispers of cowardice. Instead, Harry's voice pulled him into the light. Not into heroism, not into redemption, that wasn't Harry's to give, but into humanity. There's also the matter of legacy. Years later, when the world would talk of Harry's heroism, they would remember Voldemort, the Elder Wand, the scar. Few would remember the way he stood between Draco and judgment. But that moment lingers, quietly powerful, in the tapestry of who Harry is, a boy who suffered under cruelty, who bore the hatred of Draco Malfoy for years, and still chose to spare him. And Draco, for his part, did not thank him, not then. But that was never the point. This wasn't about gratitude, this was about drawing a boundary between justice and revenge. Draco's silence was fitting. It echoed the unspoken truth between them. They had been enemies shaped by circumstance, but Harry had refused to let that define the final page of their shared story. It's important to see that this moment also symbolizes the end of something. The end of childhood rivalries, the end of house divisions, the end of war narratives that demand death as the only answer. Harry, in saving Draco, is also saving a part of himself. The boy who once thought the world was divided neatly into good and bad. Even Voldemort, with all his power and cruelty, couldn't comprehend what Harry did that day. Voldemort believed in allegiance or death, in bloodlines and purity, but Harry believed in choice. And Draco, though never brave enough to speak it aloud, had made his choice too. He had not cast a single curse for Voldemort. He had fled. That cowardice, as Harry saw it, was a flicker of hope. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, this scene is easy to miss, overshadowed by larger moments, Snape's memories, Harry's sacrifice, the duel in the Great Hall. But it is in these quiet, morally potent decisions that true character is revealed. Harry's story isn't just about defeating Voldemort, it's about resisting the urge to become him. Draco wasn't just a rival from school, he was a symbol of everything Harry had been told to hate. And yet when the fire came, when the walls shook and the air burned, Harry reached for him. He didn't hesitate, because Harry understood that the true enemy wasn't always the person in front of you. It was the idea that people can't change. And so, while others fought and died and cheered and cursed, Harry stood still for a moment, defending a boy who had once called him Scarhead. And with that, he didn't just save Draco Malfoy, he saved the belief that even in war, there can be mercy. Number 19, Draco's Curse, Sectumsempra as a Mirror of Pain. In the still shadows of the boys' lavatory, the silence was shattered, not by the echo of footsteps or the slosh of water, but by something far more intimate. The edge of fear made real. Harry Potter stood trembling, wand outstretched, his heart hammering like a snare drum. Before him, Draco Malfoy lay sprawled across the cold tiles, blood gushing from invisible wounds, life escaping him in deep red rivers. In that moment, magic ceased to be wondrous. It became something ancient, something merciless. And for the first time in his young life, Harry understood that power in the wrong hands was not just dangerous, it was devastating. Sectumsempra. The spell had a name that slid from the tongue like a whisper of steel. Harry had found it scrawled in the margins of the Half-Blood Prince's old potions book. One of many incantations jotted there, half lost to time and carelessness. It had no explanation, no warning, just a brief annotation. For enemies. That had been enough. But Harry had not known, not truly, what it would do. Not until he saw Draco screaming in pain, clutching at his stomach, gasping for air in a room where even the ghosts seemed to recoil. The spell cleaved through flesh not like a blade, but like intention itself. Invisible gashes had opened across Draco's chest, spilling more than blood. It poured out the pretense, the arrogance, the cruelty. And what was left was only a boy. A pale, frightened boy, caught in a moment he never thought could happen to him. For all his sneers and swagger, Draco had lived in the illusion that danger was a storybook enemy, always far away, always vanquished. But now, crumpled on the floor, he came face to face with mortality. And Harry was the one who placed it there. This moment, so brief in the grand tale of Hogwarts, was a turning point more profound than many realized. Here, in the stark silence after the spell, a line was crossed that neither boy could step back from. For Harry, it was the death of innocence, not because he had killed, but because he had learned how easily he could. And for Draco, it was the beginning of fear not of Harry, but of himself. What kind of life had led him here? Why had he been forced into the role of enemy, of target? Snape arrived like a storm, black robes billowing, urgency etched in his face. He performed the counter-curse with frightening precision, sealing Draco's wounds before the damage became irreversible. And as Draco was carried away, unconscious and pale, Harry stood alone. Not physically, but spiritually. He could not escape the knowledge that he had maimed someone, that his fury had found too willing a weapon. "I didn't know what it would do," he cried later. But even as he said it, he wasn't sure that was true. What lingered afterward was not guilt in the conventional sense. It was horror, slow and creeping, that he had felt satisfaction, even for a second, when the spell had worked. Sectumsempra had been more than a defense. It had been vengeance. Draco had taunted him for years, insulted his friends, tried to sabotage him at every turn. And in that moment, in the bathroom, Harry had let those years of anger guide his hand. The spell had obeyed. Draco, meanwhile, bore scars not only on his skin but on his identity. For days he walked the castle halls with a new silence, his bravado drained like the blood from his body. He had been reduced to prey, and he knew it. For all his lineage, his schemes, his father's connections, he had been undone by one word spoken in rage. And he had survived. But that survival came with a price. The knowledge that he was vulnerable, and that Harry, of all people, had held his life in balance. That year, the air between them changed. No more juvenile hexes in corridors. No more duels for the amusement of others. There was only tension now, brittle and charged, as if they were two war-torn soldiers who had glimpsed what the other was capable of and found no delight in it. There was something unspeakable between them. Not respect, not forgiveness, but a kind of haunted acknowledgement. Dumbledore never openly reprimanded Harry for the spell, though the consequences were swift. His potions book was taken, his privileges revoked. But more than that, a cold wall settled between Harry and Ginny, and even Ron looked at him with unease. Only Hermione truly grasped what had shifted. "That spell was meant to kill," she said quietly. "It's dark magic, Harry." And deep down, Harry agreed. But it wasn't just the spell, it was the part of him that had wanted to use it. What made Sectumsempra different from other curses wasn't only its effect, but its intent. Avada Kedavra was a clean death. Crucio was pain for pain's sake. But Sectumsempra was something crueler, a betrayal of the body, a desecration that mimicked a sword with no blade. It was intimate, invasive. It said, "I want to see you bleed, even if I don't know why." For Draco, the encounter tore away more than muscle and skin. It revealed the lie of invincibility he had clung to his whole life. Raised in the echoing halls of Malfoy Manor, trained to believe that power meant immunity, he had been plunged into a truth more raw than any punishment his father could offer. That magic did not care for bloodlines. That in the real world, power came at a price. And he had not been ready to pay it. Harry, meanwhile, began to question the prince. Who had written those words in the book? What kind of wizard invented spells that cut and tore without warning? And why had Harry felt drawn to them? The mirror of the spell's cruelty was in Harry himself, a part of him that craved victory, that could not forgive, that saw enemies where once he had seen boys. For enemies! But what if the enemy was not the person before him, but the person inside him? Later, when he learned the truth, that the half-blood prince was none other than Severus Snape, the realization struck like lightning. Snape had lived in darkness long before Harry had even known the word. He had crafted the spell not as a joke or a challenge, but as a weapon forged from a lifetime of being hunted and humiliated. Sectumsempra was not created in malice. It was born from pain, and perhaps that's what made it so potent, because when Harry used it, he wasn't casting someone else's curse. He was channeling his own buried grief for Sirius, for Cedric, for the weight of a prophecy that had turned his life into a war before he could choose peace. Sectumsempra wasn't just Snape's creation, it was Harry's inheritance, one he never asked for, and one he would never forget. Draco would never speak of the incident again, not to his friends, not to his family, but the distance in his gaze whenever Harry passed told the story. He no longer saw a rival. He saw a mirror. And in it, his own weaknesses stared back at him unblinking. It wasn't hatred anymore, it was fear. The irony of the spell was that it wounded both caster and victim. Harry's hand had not bled, but his soul had, and Draco, though stitched back together, had been changed in some invisible way. He began to disappear from crowds, to walk alone. The boy who had once thrived on attention had become a ghost within the walls of his own house. Because when you bleed and survive, you don't walk away the same. Years later, they would speak again, briefly, formally, as men who had once been boys trapped in a war too big for them. And neither would mention the bathroom, the blood, or the silence that followed. But Harry would remember, and so would Draco. Because magic may heal wounds, but it does not erase memory. Sectumsempra, Harry once whispered in the dark, wand held still in his trembling hand, and though he never cast it again, the spell stayed with him, like a scar not on the skin but beneath it, invisible, unhealing. Because it wasn't just a spell, it was a moment of truth, a revelation, a mirror, and mirrors, after all, never lie. Number 20. Why Harry never took revenge. From the very beginning, Hogwarts was not a sanctuary for Harry Potter. To most first years, it was a magical haven, a place where childhood dreams materialized. But to Harry, it was another battlefield, different from the cupboard under the stairs, but still marked with whispered judgments, cold glares, and the ever-present sneer of Draco Malfoy. Yet throughout 7 turbulent years, Harry Potter never once stooped to revenge. That restraint, often overlooked, is among the most powerful acts of heroism in the entire saga. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the moment Draco Malfoy offered his hand to Harry, it wasn't a gesture of friendship. It was a calculated attempt to assert dominance, wrapped in polite words. Harry rejected it, not because of pride, but because he saw what Draco represented. Arrogance, entitlement, and cruelty disguised as tradition. From that instant, an unspoken rivalry was born, but even then, Harry's response was not to provoke, but simply to walk his own path. Over the years, Draco tested him relentlessly. In the Chamber of Secrets, it was Draco who called Hermione a mudblood, one of the ugliest slurs in the wizarding world. Harry was furious. He stood up for her, of course, but he never plotted to harm Draco in return. Many would have. A child raised in cruelty, finally given power, would understandably seek some kind of justice, even if petty. But Harry didn't retaliate. His justice was in the defense of others, not the punishment of his enemies. Even when Harry had the perfect opportunity to publicly humiliate Draco, during their many Quidditch matches, for instance, he chose not to. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, after Draco pretended to be injured to sabotage a game, Harry's response was not revenge, but focus. He flew with determination, played fairly, and won by merit. There was no victory speech, no mockery, just quiet excellence. There was something inside Harry that refused to mirror the cruelty he had known. At age 11, he had seen the ghost of his dead parents in the mirror of Erist. He had heard their screams when the Dementors approached. He had watched Cedric Diggory die, Voldemort rise, Sirius fall. Revenge never motivated him. Survival did, justice did, protection did, but never hatred, and never spite. Draco, meanwhile, was shaped by a world that worshipped vengeance. Lucius Malfoy taught his son that power was its own reward, and that humiliation of others was a sign of strength. In their second year, Lucius gave Ginny Weasley Tom Riddle's diary, a trap that could have killed her. And Draco laughed at the chaos, not knowing the full cost. He had been taught to see people as pawns, but Harry was taught to see them as people, even when they wronged him. When Professor Umbridge took over Hogwarts in the Order of the Phoenix, and Draco was appointed as one of her inquisitorial squad, it would have been easy, even expected, for Harry to plot his revenge. Here was Draco, empowered by an authoritarian regime, using it to dock points from Gryffindor and punish Harry's friends. But Harry, again, did not fall into the trap. Instead, he founded Dumbledore's army. He didn't tear others down, he built something better. In that very book, when Draco and his gang attempted to catch the DA, Harry and Hermione outwitted them. They escaped. They could have left a humiliating hex on Draco. They didn't. In fact, it was Draco who would later suffer at the hands of Death Eaters, and Harry, despite all the years of rivalry, never gloated. Not once. One of the most telling moments came in The Half-Blood Prince. Draco, given a deadly mission by Voldemort, was visibly unraveling. He looked pale, he avoided eye contact, he no longer mocked, he was no longer the prince of Slytherin House, just a boy crumbling under impossible pressure. And Harry saw it. He still fought him, of course. He even used the Sectumsempra curse in a fit of rage. But afterward, when Draco lay bleeding and broken, Harry panicked. He was horrified. He didn't revel in the sight of a defeated rival. He ran for help. Snape saved Draco's life. But it was Harry's remorse that truly mattered. That scene revealed Harry's greatest strength, empathy. Even in anger, even in moments of mistake, he recoiled from cruelty. His soul was too bruised to ever want to bruise another. "I didn't mean to," Harry stammered to Snape. He meant it. Deeply, genuinely, he had no desire to destroy Draco. He simply wanted the truth. And what was Draco's truth? A scared boy, raised among supremacists, thrust into a war he didn't choose. That realization became central in the Deathly Hallows, particularly during the Battle of Hogwarts. Harry could have left Draco to his fate in the Room of Requirement. He could have watched the fire consume him. Instead, he turned back. "If we die for them, Harry, I'll kill you," Ron said. But Harry had already leapt into the flames. He saved Draco. 3 words, a lifetime of meaning. It wasn't a tactical decision. It wasn't to gain favor. It wasn't even obligation. It was the final act in a long, unspoken arc of mercy. Draco had never shown Harry kindness, but Harry gave it anyway. Because that's who he was, and that's what made him different. Not a saint, but someone who understood that revenge solves nothing. That cycles end when someone chooses to break them. J.K. Rowling once wrote, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." That choice, to reach for Draco instead of letting him fall, was among Harry's greatest. It echoed through the rubble of Hogwarts like a quiet anthem. Even Voldemort, who offered him power, who tempted him with vengeance against all who hurt him, never turned Harry into a killer. Not even Bellatrix's taunts could pull Harry into bloodlust. Sirius was lost. Dobby died in his arms. Fred was gone. Lupin, Tonks, all casualties of a war that Draco's family helped start. And yet, when the dust settled, Harry used the Elder Wand, the most powerful wand in existence, not for revenge, but to repair his old one. "I'm putting it back," he said, "where it came from." He didn't seek to conquer, he sought to restore. Draco, too, changed. Slowly. He never became Harry's friend, but in The Cursed Child, years later, he nods to the boy who once saved his life. There's no sneer, no mockery, just a quiet respect. The wall between them had cracked, not with spells, but with compassion. It began with Harry's refusal to retaliate. That nobility, raw and unpretentious, melted something inside Draco that power never could. We must also remember the time when Harry entered the Forbidden Forest in the Deathly Hallows, ready to die. He didn't think of Draco, he didn't dream of victory, he didn't plan for revenge, he gave himself willingly, he became the sacrificial heart of the entire resistance, and that, not his scar, not his fame, made him the true opposite of Voldemort. Because Voldemort was vengeance. He was born of it, moulded by it. Everything he did, from murdering Muggleborns to splitting his soul, it was a cry for control, for payback. But Harry, orphaned, abused, betrayed, chose love. Again and again, that choice cost him everything, but it gave him peace. One final image lingers. In the epilogue, 19 years later, Harry stands at King's Cross Station. His son, Albus Severus, fears he'll be sorted into Slytherin. Harry kneels and whispers, "You were named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was probably the bravest man I ever knew." He doesn't name Draco, but the message is clear. Old enemies do not define the future. Mercy does. And that perhaps is the deepest reason Harry never sought revenge. Because he understood that vengeance is a chain, one he had the courage to break, not through grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but by simply walking away or by offering help, by seeing the humanity in someone like Draco Malfoy, and choosing not to hate him. In the end, Harry's legacy is not just defeating Voldemort. It's proving again and again that strength does not lie in domination. It lies in restraint, in the silence after the battle, in the hand extended to an old rival, in the simple, unspoken truth, you do not need to destroy someone to be free of them. Number 21, Hermione and Draco more than just dislike. Of all the intricate relationships in the Harry Potter series, few are as misunderstood and quietly fascinating as the complex thread that links Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. While their dynamic never blossoms into friendship or reconciliation, there exists a layered subtext, especially in the 6th book, that suggests something deeper than mere mutual disdain. Their interactions are typically charged with tension, driven by opposing values and backgrounds, yet hidden beneath this antagonism lies a brief, flickering moment of something resembling human understanding. It begins almost imperceptibly when Hermione is the first to sense a change in Draco, even when others, including Harry, fail to see it. From the earliest pages of the series, Draco Malfoy assumes the role of antagonist. With his sneering disdain for Muggleborns, particularly Hermione, he becomes a symbol of everything she stands against. The insult that marks their relationship is unforgettable. "You'll soon find out some wizarding families are better than others, Granger. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there." This was Draco's first attempt to assert superiority, and when Hermione refused, choosing loyalty over pedigree, a line was drawn. The term mudblood became a weapon he would wield again and again, embedding the wounds deeply into her sense of identity. Yet Hermione, despite her sharp intellect and fierce loyalty, was not made of unyielding steel. Her emotional intelligence, often eclipsed by her encyclopedic knowledge, allowed her to perceive nuances that others missed. In the Half-Blood Prince, that quality surfaces with unexpected clarity. She begins to watch Draco not as an enemy, but as a person unraveling beneath pressure. When Harry insists that Malfoy is up to something dark, Hermione doesn't scoff. She doesn't dismiss it. She simply says, "I don't know, Harry, but there is something different about him this year." There's no affection in her voice, no sympathy. But there is recognition, an understanding born from observation, not emotion. This shift occurs slowly, but it's real. Hermione has always been the most perceptive of the trio when it comes to reading others. While Harry burns with suspicion and Ron is largely indifferent, Hermione pays attention. She notices Draco's pallor, the way his arrogance has given way to anxiety. She sees how he isolates himself, avoiding even his own friends. The swagger is gone. In its place is a weight he cannot shake. And unlike Harry, who frames this change as something dangerous, Hermione sees the fear beneath it. Not fear of being caught, but fear of failing at something terrible he's been forced to do. There's one particular moment that makes this awareness painfully clear. After Katie Bell's cursed necklace incident, Hermione doesn't leap to conclusions. Harry is quick to accuse Draco, convinced of his guilt, but Hermione hesitates. "But it could have been anyone, couldn't it?" she says, trying to apply reason. Still in private, her unease lingers. She doesn't dismiss the possibility. In fact, she starts looking at Draco with new eyes, not trusting him, but no longer viewing him as a simple villain. That distinction matters. It shows that she has begun to see shades of grey in someone she once viewed as entirely dark. This internal shift is never dramatized with grand gestures. There are no confessions, no redemptive arcs between them. But in Chapter 15, The Unbreakable Vow, Hermione sees Draco's reflection in Madame Malkin's robe shop. She watches as he lashes out, rude and agitated. His mother tries to calm him, and though the encounter is brief, Hermione is unnerved. She doesn't merely shrug it off, she senses something. Later, she tells Harry, "He looked really ill, didn't he?" The fact that she noticed and was affected is crucial. It signals the beginning of a deeper awareness, one that transcends old grudges. Draco, of course, remains cruel throughout much of the book. He nearly kills Katie. He allows a Death Eater into Hogwarts. He even tries, with trembling hands, to murder Dumbledore. But there is something in that bathroom scene, when Harry uses Sectumsempra, that reveals the full measure of Draco's vulnerability. He bleeds, sobbing, helpless. And in that moment, though Hermione isn't present, her earlier observations echo with truth. She was right. Draco is no longer the boy who taunted her with slurs. He is a terrified 16-year-old, caught in a web too large to escape. Later, in Chapter 27, The Lightning-Struck Tower, Dumbledore pleads with Draco, "You are not a killer, Draco." And indeed he isn't. He hesitates, his wand trembles, he cannot do it. And Hermione, though absent from this climactic moment, had already sensed its inevitability. She saw the fracture lines forming before the rest did. Not because she forgave him, not because she cared for him, but because she understood people. And Draco was crumbling under the weight of expectations and fear. This kind of perceptiveness defines Hermione. She is not merely brilliant, she is empathetic in a way that defies simple kindness. She can hold someone accountable and still acknowledge their humanity. That is a rare trait in a world divided by blood and house. Draco called her filthy little mudblood, in the Chamber of Secrets. He mocked her tears when Buckbeak was sentenced. He sneered when she fought for house elf rights. But by the 6th book, even she cannot ignore the cost of the war on someone like him. Not because she pities him, but because she knows what it means to be afraid and alone. The films, unfortunately, flatten this subtlety. In the cinematic version of Half-Blood Prince, Hermione remains focused on her romantic jealousy over Ron and Lavender, barely reacting to Draco's unraveling. This is a disservice not only to her character, but to the quiet narrative J.K. Rowling built beneath the surface. In the books, Hermione is troubled by what she sees in Draco. She doesn't say it outright. She doesn't forgive him. But she watches. She analyzes. She feels the shift, and it changes something in her. That human response is erased from the screen, where conflict is often simplified to good versus evil. In the books, Hermione never stops opposing Draco's beliefs. She never forgets what he's said to her. But she is capable of separating the boy from the ideology. In doing so, she offers readers a lesson in nuance. Her acknowledgement of Draco's suffering is not weakness, it is strength. To see your enemy's pain and not rejoice in it, that requires moral clarity. It's easy to hate someone who hates you. It's harder to understand them without excusing them. Hermione does exactly that, and in doing so she demonstrates why she was always the moral compass of the trio. There is also the question of why Draco targeted Hermione with such venom. Part of it is simple. She represented everything he was taught to despise, a muggle-born who excelled beyond purebloods, a girl who defied authority, challenged injustice, and refused to be cowed. But on another level, she terrified him. Hermione exposed the lie of blood purity. She was undeniable proof that intelligence and power had nothing to do with heritage. That made her dangerous in his eyes, and perhaps in his heart he knew it. By the 6th year, the fear that drove his hatred begins to turn inward. Draco is no longer preoccupied with Hermione, but her shadow still lingers. She remains a symbol of everything the Death Eaters want to crush. And when she looks at him in those hallways, pale and withdrawn, she doesn't see a rival. She sees a boy unraveling. She sees a war that is no longer theoretical. Her eyes follow him, not out of interest, but because something in her knows what it means to be hunted by a world that doesn't want you to exist. There's a line in Order of the Phoenix that often goes overlooked. When Hermione hears Draco sneer about her blood again, she doesn't cry. She doesn't scream. She simply stiffens, then says, "You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach," then punches him. It's a moment of triumph, but by Half-Blood Prince the fury is gone. In its place is a quiet concern, not forgiveness, not acceptance, just awareness, a shift from anger to understanding, however fleeting. That is growth, that is grace. The tragedy of Draco Malfoy is that he was never free to become who he might have been. And the tragedy of Hermione's insight is that she could see that truth clearly, painfully, and yet do nothing about it. She was never given the chance to confront him, not really, but she saw him, and sometimes being seen is the most anyone can hope for, especially someone raised to believe that masks are safer than vulnerability. In the end, Hermione remains loyal to her values. She fights for justice, she defends the oppressed, and she helps destroy the system Draco once worshipped. But in one small corner of her heart, there's a recognition, a flicker of insight that says he was just a boy and he was afraid. And that recognition, quiet as it is, makes her stronger, not weaker. It is not softness, it is clarity. It is what separates heroes from warriors and people from symbols. Hermione and Draco were never meant to be allies. Their lives diverged too early, too sharply, but their story is not merely one of hatred. It is a study in human complexity. In a world that demands loyalty to sides, Hermione's gaze across the Great Hall, troubled, questioning, remains one of the most powerful moments in the series, because in that gaze we see not forgiveness but understanding, and sometimes that's more important. Number 22, Scorpius Malfoy, a bridge between worlds. In the shadows of the Malfoy Manor, a new light once flickered, uncertain and quiet. His name was Scorpius Hyperion Malfoy. He bore the sharp cheekbones and platinum hair of his father Draco, yet he carried none of the arrogance. From the moment he first stepped onto the Hogwarts Express, the world expected a second Draco, another Slytherin prince soaked in blood purity and disdain. But Scorpius, like a rare flower growing in the ashes of war, bloomed differently. Where Draco had once narrowed his eyes at those deemed unworthy, Scorpius widened his own in curiosity. He was born into privilege, but not into hatred. The whispers of his bloodline followed him. After all, many believed he was actually the child of Voldemort, a rumor so persistent it shaped his early days at Hogwarts like a cloak too heavy for his shoulders. Yet instead of turning bitter, Scorpius turned inward, finding comfort not in power or prejudice, but in books, in quiet humor, and, eventually, in one unlikely friendship that would define his life. Albus Severus Potter, son of the legendary Harry, arrived at Hogwarts burdened with expectations he couldn't carry. While James Potter excelled in popularity and talent, Albus struggled to find himself beneath the looming shadow of his father's legacy. The Sorting Hat placed him in Slytherin, a decision that stunned not just the school, but the wizarding world beyond. And it was in that very house, once the symbol of cunning and division, that he found his refuge, not from fame, but from its echo. And at the heart of that refuge stood Scorpius. Their bond was not built in dramatic fashion. It wasn't a moment of shared heroism or tragedy. It was simple. Two boys seated together, unwanted by others, recognized the loneliness in each other. Scorpius, with his awkward wit and hunger for friendship, reached out first. And Albus, with his resentment toward a world that measured him by his last name, grasped that hand. What formed between them was not just a friendship, it was a bridge, forged from two childhoods soaked in different legacies. This friendship, set against a background of family pain and historical rivalry, was nothing short of revolutionary. Harry and Draco had once stood as adversaries, raised on different visions of the wizarding world. Their hatred was sharpened by war, by betrayal, by blood. But Scorpius and Albus had none of that. They inherited the weight, yes, but they chose not to wear it. In Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, this contrast becomes the story's emotional core. Scorpius is, in every way, the opposite of what a Malfoy was expected to be. He's studious, kind, painfully self-aware. When others mock him, he does not retaliate with cruelty, but with a soft, self-deprecating grin. His friendship with Albus is unshakable even when their families disapprove, even when the world suspects dark secrets. In one moment of profound clarity, Scorpius says, "My name is Scorpius and I'm fine." It's a simple line, but it speaks volumes. He doesn't need to be powerful. He doesn't need to prove anything. He just needs to be himself. The Time Turner, a dangerous magical artifact introduced early in the play, becomes the vehicle through which both boys confront the weight of their father's legacies. In trying to right the wrongs of the past, they unleash chaos across timelines. Cedric Diggory lives, but at a horrifying cost. Voldemort rises again. In an alternate reality, Albus never exists and Scorpius must walk the shadowed halls of a Hogwarts ruled by darkness. In this twisted world, Scorpius is called the Scorpion King and is revered as a dark prince. Yet even there, even when surrounded by admiration, he recoils. He knows this is not who he is. He rejects the power that so many Malfoys would have craved. This moment, Scorpius, standing alone in a reality where he has everything but love, is one of the most defining in the story. It is his quiet resistance, his refusal to accept power at the cost of kindness, that makes him a true hero. He fights not with a wand, but with heart. He rewrites the Malfoy legacy with each gentle choice, each moment of loyalty to Albus, each time he chooses understanding over ambition. Draco, too, changes through his son. He watches Scorpius become what he could never have imagined, a boy who befriends Potters, who finds strength in vulnerability. There is pain in Draco's eyes as he reflects on his own past, on the choices that nearly destroyed him. But in Scorpius he sees hope. He sees a future unchained from hatred. In a rare moment of openness, Draco tells Harry, "My son is the most important thing in my life." And in that sentence, the battle lines drawn decades earlier begin to blur. Scorpius is not just a character, he's a symbol. He represents the possibility of healing, the end of inherited grudges. Where once the name Malfoy conjured images of dark alleys and whispered curses, Scorpius brings warmth. His presence in Albus's life challenges Harry's biases, forces him to look at Draco not as an enemy, but as a father. And through their sons, Harry and Draco inch toward reconciliation, not with words, but with trust. In the end, it is Scorpius who leads Albus back from the brink. When Albus feels lost and ashamed, it is Scorpius who reminds him of who he is. When the time turner shatters and timelines begin to collapse, it is Scorpius who, with a brilliant mind and unwavering loyalty, pieces together the path back. Their bond does not save the world in the way Harry's trio once did, but it saves each other, and perhaps that is more important. Even in the smallest gestures, the transformation is visible. Scorpius collects sweets for Albus, remembers small details, makes jokes to lighten the dark. He carries the emotional labor of their friendship with a grace that feels almost adult, and he never once asks for anything in return. He loves quietly, fiercely, without pride. The play hints, ever so gently, that Scorpius's affection for Albus may be deeper than friendship. He stumbles around the topic of romance, asking awkwardly about Rose Granger Weasley, but his eyes always return to Albus. And when Albus nearly dies in the alternate timeline, it is Scorpius who falls to his knees, who screams, who refuses to accept a world without his friend. Whether romantic or not, the love between them is real, and it defies the old world's rules. In this, Scorpius bridges not just families, but generations. He shows that children can learn from the past without being imprisoned by it. He stands at the intersection of old bloodlines, carrying both their burdens and their dreams. And he chooses over and over the light. One of the most touching scenes is at the end of the play, when Scorpius quietly asks Rose if she might consider going to Hogsmeade with him sometime. It's a small moment, almost humorous, but it shows how far he's come. From a boy weighed down by rumor and isolation, he has become someone who dares to hope. It is courage of a different kind, not the explosive kind that duels dragons, but the soft kind that faces rejection and still believes in kindness. The wizarding world had always been divided, pure blood and muggle-born, Slytherin and Gryffindor, light and dark. But Scorpius Malfoy stands in the middle of all that, unshaken. He walks the path his father feared and his grandfather despised, and he walks it with his head held high. Through him, Cursed Child does not just continue the story of Harry Potter, it transforms it. It tells us that healing is not loud, not fast. It takes years. It takes sons who ask better questions than their fathers. It takes laughter in the dark, hands held beneath castle walls, secrets shared on late-night staircases. Scorpius, in many ways, is the story. He's not the chosen one, he's not the brave one with a sword, but he is the bridge, the one who connects not only Albus and Draco, but the past and the future. He reminds us that sometimes the bravest thing a boy can do is be gentle in a world that taught his family otherwise. And perhaps that's the real magic of Hogwarts, not the spells or the battles, but the quiet revolution of a boy who chose to be kind. Number 23, Harry tracks Draco with the Marauder's map. In the dim corridors of Hogwarts, as the chill of the approaching winter began to seep through the castle walls, Harry Potter found himself gripped not by the ordinary concerns of sixth-year students, quizzes, Quidditch, or even romantic entanglements, but by a gnawing suspicion that something dark was taking root beneath the surface. Draco Malfoy, once just an annoying rival and mouthpiece for pure-blood arrogance, had changed. And Harry felt it, not just in passing glances, but in the heavy silence that followed Malfoy like a shadow, in the strange pallor that haunted his face, and in the way he disappeared again and again from the flow of school life. It was not curiosity that drove Harry to obsessively monitor Malfoy's every move. It was fear, raw and visceral. Voldemort had returned. Death Eaters were active, and Harry knew that if anyone in their year could be entangled in something sinister, it was Draco. The idea seemed outlandish to some, a 16-year-old Death Eater. But to Harry it made a dreadful kind of sense. Draco had the motive, revenge for his father's downfall, and perhaps even the connections. His weapon was one of the Marauder's greatest creations, the Marauder's map. A faded, foldable parchment born of mischief and magical brilliance, it held the entire layout of Hogwarts, complete with moving footprints and names of every soul within the walls. In the past, Harry had used the map for pranks, for sneaking into Hogsmeade, or simply for keeping tabs on Filch, but now it became a lifeline. He kept it close at meals, in the dormitory, even hidden beneath his robes in class. Every free moment his eyes scanned the twisting halls drawn in ink, always searching for a single name: Draco Malfoy. It started subtly at first. Harry would see Draco walking the first-floor corridor, then later heading toward the Slytherin common room. But then patterns emerged. Draco would vanish from the map, his name simply gone, from specific places. Most often from the area near the Room of Requirement, a place known for its ability to transform into what one needed most. Harry didn't understand it immediately. He only noticed that Draco would disappear for long stretches of time, with no record of where he had gone. But sometimes, the book says, Malfoy simply vanished off the map completely. This confounded Harry. He tested the map repeatedly, checking other students, teachers, even the ghosts. Everyone else was accounted for, their names floating dutifully through the corridors and classrooms. But Draco's name would blink out of existence. No warning, no trace. It was impossible, maddening. Harry grew more obsessed with each passing day, his schoolwork slipping, his attention in class broken, as he pored over the parchment during late nights with only the firelight to keep him company. There was one night, not long after Christmas, when he saw it again, Draco walking swiftly down the 7th-floor corridor. Then, as he reached the wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Balmy, his name faded. Not a slow disappearance, just gone, as if he'd passed into another dimension. Harry felt his pulse race. That corridor was near the Room of Requirement, a space Harry himself had used in 5th year. He had walked past that wall 3 times thinking of what he needed, and the room had appeared. What if Draco was doing the same? Harry tested this theory more than once, sometimes alone, sometimes with Ron and Hermione watching him with unease. He would wait outside the Room of Requirement, checking the map obsessively, hoping to catch Draco in the act. But Malfoy was careful, too careful. Whatever he was doing, he was always one step ahead, as if he knew he was being watched. The obsession began to eat away at Harry's nights, filling his thoughts with worst-case scenarios. He imagined Draco with Death Eaters, perhaps even Voldemort himself, inside the castle walls. He imagined plots and poisonings, sabotage and murder. He brought his suspicions to Dumbledore, but the headmaster remained elusive, absorbed in his own mysterious missions and private lessons. When Harry voiced his fears to McGonagall, she dismissed them curtly. "Draco Malfoy is a student," she said, "not a criminal." But Harry wasn't convinced. He had seen too much, lost too much. Cedric's death still haunted him. Sirius was gone. He wasn't going to let the school fall to pieces while the teachers buried their heads in denial. There was a day, cloudy and cold, when Harry saw Draco vanish from the map yet again. This time, the moment hit harder than before. The footprints had shown him moving up the stairs quickly as if in a rush. Then silence. No name, no motion. Just a blank spot on the paper. Harry clutched the map in trembling fingers, knowing instinctively that something had just happened. This was no ordinary hiding place. It was a doorway to something dangerous. Eventually, Hermione voiced what Harry had begun to fear himself. "Harry, I think you're becoming obsessed." But Harry couldn't stop. It wasn't just about hating Draco anymore. It was about protecting the people around him. Dumbledore, Ginny, Ron, the whole school. He couldn't explain why he felt so sure, only that every part of him screamed that Malfoy was plotting something that could unravel everything. Then came the moment of revelation, when Harry, slipping out under his invisibility cloak, followed Snape and caught a snatch of conversation. "You are to have no contact with the boy," Snape hissed to someone out of sight. Later, he cornered Malfoy in a bathroom and they fought. Spells flew, rage exploded. Draco bled, and Harry realized just how far this had gone. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was war. The Marauder's map was both a tool and a tormentor. Harry stared at it so often that its ink became etched into his memory. He dreamed of it. He saw the twisting lines of corridors behind his eyelids. He began to think like the map, to track not just Draco, but patterns, tendencies, timing. He noted when Crabbe and Goyle moved alone, without Draco, often stationed outside suspicious areas. He began to piece it all together, decoys, distractions, concealment. When Fred and George had used the map in third year, it was for mischief. When Harry used it now, it was with the desperation of a soldier. Every step Malfoy took became a clue. Every absence was a message, and slowly the truth revealed itself. "He's using the room of requirement," Harry finally admitted aloud. "He's trying to fix something in there." Hermione and Ron were skeptical, but Harry knew it with the kind of clarity that comes only after sleepless nights and burning eyes. The idea of the vanishing cabinet came much later, a puzzle piece Harry hadn't even known was missing. It was only after overhearing snippets in conversation, catching odd references and recalling that the same cabinet had once been used as a hiding place years before that he connected the dots. Malfoy wasn't just disappearing, he was building a doorway between Hogwarts and Borgin and Berks, between safety and death, and it had all started with that damn map. What the films gloss over, what they reduce to a few anxious stares, is, in truth, a deep and spiraling descent into obsession. The book gives us the texture of Harry's anxiety, the ritual of checking and rechecking, the agony of inaction. He watched the map for nearly 4 hours before he finally saw Malfoy reappear. 4 hours! 4 silent, anxious, exhausting hours. That is not the behavior of a curious teenager. That is the behavior of someone on the edge, someone who knows that something terrible is coming. It wasn't just about Draco either. The Marauder's map became a symbol of Harry's growing isolation. He couldn't confide in his professors. Hermione no longer fully understood. Ron, often too distracted by Lavender, didn't always listen. And so Harry sat alone, in the Gryffindor common room, in the library, even in the Astronomy Tower, unfolding and folding the map like a sacred text, looking for the same name, again and again and again. His obsession with Draco became a kind of mirror for the way Voldemort operated, in secret, in silence, beneath the surface. And just as Voldemort used proxies to do his bidding, so too did Malfoy, enlisting Crabbe and Goyle to keep watch while he toiled away behind a wall that refused to open unless the user's need was genuine, and Draco's need was very genuine indeed, to fix the vanishing cabinet, to let Death Eaters into Hogwarts, to prove himself worthy of the Dark Lord's trust. Eventually Dumbledore died. Snape cast the curse. Draco stood with his wand raised, but could not bring himself to kill. Yet in many ways it was Harry's tireless watch, his weeks of silent tracking, that had brought the truth into the open. It was the Marauder's map, silent, impartial, tireless, that bore witness to the pattern before anyone else saw it. While the others doubted and dismissed, Harry watched, and the map recorded. "Malfoy knows what he's doing," Harry said. "He's been planning something all year." And he was right. More right than even he had feared. Malfoy's mission was real. The threat was real. The obsession wasn't madness. It was a warning sign that no one else could see. The boy who had once used the map to sneak around at night had grown into someone using it to guard the castle in his own way. The Marauder's map is one of the quietest, yet most powerful symbols in the series. And in Half-Blood Prince it becomes more than just a tool. It becomes the reflection of Harry's vigilance, his isolation, and his evolution into someone who must see the threats others choose to ignore. Draco was not just a rival anymore. He was a symptom of a world tearing apart at the seams, and Harry, map in hand, was one of the last lines of defense. Number 24, Draco's envy of Harry. Draco Malfoy watched Harry Potter from the shadows of every hallway at Hogwarts, eyes gleaming with something far more complex than hatred. On the surface, it was easy to believe Draco simply loathed him. After all, from the first moment they met, sparks had flown. But beneath the sneers and pointed insults, there burned a quiet, pulsing envy that followed Draco through every year at school. He never said it aloud. He didn't have to. It was in the way his voice sharpened when professors praised Harry. It was in the slight twitch of his lips when a Gryffindor victory resounded through the castle. Malfoy despised Harry because he wanted to be him. At 11, Draco had offered Harry his hand. It was not just a greeting, it was a test, a way to evaluate his potential rival. When Harry refused it, favouring Ron Weasley instead, Draco's pride cracked, but deeper still, something else splintered, his belief that birthright alone would grant him the admiration he believed he deserved. Harry didn't care for lineage, and yet the world seemed to care for Harry. That first rejection planted a seed. Draco would never forget it. "You'll soon find out some wizarding families are better than others, Potter," he had said. But what he really meant was, I want to be seen. I want to matter too. As the years passed, Draco's resentment grew in tandem with Harry's fame. But what pained Draco most wasn't Harry's celebrity, it was that it was earned. Harry didn't bask in his popularity, he never sought it. Yet teachers adored him, students followed him, and the newspapers never tired of his name. Draco, raised on tales of his family's superiority, found himself drowning in Harry's shadow. When Professor Snape favoured Draco, it felt obligatory. When Professor McGonagall praised Harry, it felt sincere. That difference was unbearable. Even on the Quidditch field, Draco tried to match Harry. In his second year, he joined the Slytherin team, flaunting his Nimbus 2001 broomstick, gifted by Lucius Malfoy. He boasted about his superior equipment and his connections, but his performance was mechanical compared to Harry's instinctive brilliance. The crowd roared for Potter. Draco, despite his practiced smirks, heard the silence following his own plays. Harry's magic came from within. Draco's, it seemed, came from borrowed prestige. That bitter truth pressed into Draco's mind like a thorn. At the heart of Draco's envy lay the desperate desire for recognition. He needed to be important, not just feared or followed because of his name, but loved. Yet every time he tried to assert his dominance, Harry undermined him, without even trying. When the Chamber of Secrets reopened and the school whispered about the heir of Slytherin, Draco dropped hints, hungry for relevance. "You'll be next, mudbloods," he'd threaten. But when Harry spoke, Parseltongue, during the dueling club session, the crowd gasped with awe and fear. Draco stood there, wand in hand, reduced to a footnote in Harry's unfolding legend. Draco's envy turned venomous in their fourth year, when Harry was chosen as a Tri-Wizard champion. That moment shattered any illusion Draco had about competing on equal ground. He mocked Harry with badges that read "Potter stinks," and took every opportunity to question Harry's legitimacy. But the desperation beneath those taunts was clear. Draco wanted to be in that tournament. He wanted the eyes of the wizarding world fixed on him. When he whispered rumors and stirred Slytherins against Harry, it wasn't just cruelty. It was longing wrapped in spite. One of the most telling moments came in their fifth year. The newly formed Dumbledore's army, the student group Harry led, drew admiration and courage out of students who once trembled before Umbridge's rules. Draco, now an inquisitorial squad member, tried to assert his control, But it was Harry who people trusted. Even under the threat of punishment, they followed Harry into the room of requirement. Draco had the authority, but Harry had the hearts. That distinction poisoned Draco's pride. He wasn't feared in the way that inspired loyalty, only compliance. Even the Death Eater legacy couldn't grant Draco the admiration he craved. In Half-Blood Prince, when Voldemort tasked him with killing Dumbledore, Draco's posture changed. Gone was the confident sneer. Now his shoulders sagged under the weight of expectation. He was finally handed a task that placed him center stage. Yet it wasn't the recognition he had dreamed of. "I have to do this," he whispered to himself in the room of requirement. "He'll kill me otherwise." The mission revealed Draco's fragile core. He was no longer trying to outshine Harry, he was trying to survive. In one of the most poignant scenes of the series, Draco stands in the Astronomy Tower with his wand pointed at Dumbledore. The headmaster, unarmed, offers compassion instead of resistance. Draco's hand shakes. The boy who had spent years mocking others, who had walked through Hogwarts with a curled lip and lofty arrogance, now stood broken. "Draco, Draco, you are not a killer." Dumbledore saw the truth. So did Harry, hidden beneath the invisibility cloak. In that moment, the rivalry faded. What remained was a boy, lost and terrified, desperately trying to be the man his father wanted, and failing. Draco's envy never blossomed into triumph. In the Battle of Hogwarts he ran, not toward glory, but away from it. He was not brave like Harry, nor willing to die for his beliefs. That contrast was final and damning, and yet it was not wholly shameful. Draco was human, more than the mask of arrogance he wore. "My son is in there!" Narcissa Malfoy cried out during the final battle, her voice full of motherly anguish. Draco's fate wasn't to be a hero or a villain, but something far more common. A young man shaped by fear and pride, caught between his family's ideals and his own conscience. What haunted Draco was that Harry never fought for status. He didn't seek fame or demand loyalty. He simply lived by a code Draco couldn't understand, one rooted in love, loss, and sacrifice. When Sirius Black died, Harry howled with grief. When Cedric was murdered, he cried in silence. Draco, trained to see emotions as weakness, watched Harry grow stronger through them. That power, that inner fire, was what Draco lacked. And he knew it. Even their physical resemblance was a painful reminder. Both were slender boys with intense eyes. Both bore heavy legacies, Harry, the chosen one, Draco, the heir to a dying ideology. But only one became more than his legacy. Draco never escaped the echo of his father's footsteps. Harry broke free of his past and forged his own path. That freedom was what Draco truly envied, not just the spotlight, but the strength to walk into it on his own terms. By the epilogue, when Draco and Harry meet again at King's Cross, their rivalry is a distant shadow. Draco stands with his son Scorpius and nods quietly to Harry. No words are exchanged, but the moment speaks volumes. Draco is no longer chasing applause. He has settled into the quiet dignity of survival. Yet beneath that calm exterior, one can sense the remnants of that envy, dulled perhaps, but never fully extinguished. Harry's life had been forged through suffering, but it became his own. Draco's, shaped by fear, never truly belonged to him. In truth, Draco didn't hate Harry. He hated what Harry represented, the possibility of becoming something more than your upbringing, of being brave in the face of terror, of being loved without demanding it. Draco envied that effortless authenticity. He envied that people believed in Harry, not because of who his parents were, but because of who he had chosen to be. Draco never found that faith in himself. Even in moments where Draco triumphed, when he strutted through the corridors, robes billowing, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle, there was an emptiness in his eyes. They followed him because they feared being alone, not because they admired him. He knew that. That knowledge burned hotter than any spell. "Famous Harry Potter," he would hiss, but it was a bitter song, played over and over in his mind. Fame wasn't what he envied. It was meaning, purpose, heart. When Harry saved Draco's life during the fire in the Room of Requirement, it shattered the final wall. Draco, dangling over the flames, had reached for salvation from the very person he had spent years antagonizing. Harry didn't hesitate. That moment was not a reconciliation, but it was a revelation. Draco saw what it meant to be good, not perfect, not pure, but willing to act when it mattered most. He didn't thank Harry. He couldn't. The shame was too raw. But in his silence, there was a kind of respect. Years later, when stories of Hogwarts were told to new generations, Draco's name was rarely spoken. He had been a footnote, a foil to the boy who lived, but his envy was not wasted. It forced him to confront his own values, even if slowly, painfully. Envy, in Draco's case, was a mirror. He looked into it and saw not Harry, but the version of himself he wished he could have been. That ache would never leave. Draco Malfoy, for all his cruelty and posturing, was not a villain. He was a boy who had been taught to worship the wrong gods, blood, power, name. But when faced with the reality of courage and sacrifice, he could only stare from the sidelines, wishing he knew how to join the fight. His envy of Harry was not born from hatred, but from yearning, for love, for identity, for redemption. In the end, Draco Malfoy never defeated Harry Potter. But neither was he destroyed. He endured, scarred by comparison, humbled by truth. His story was not one of conquest, but of quiet reckoning. Envy had shaped him, but it had also shown him the measure of greatness and the price of being too afraid to reach for it. Number 25, Narcissa saves Harry, yet her son. The battlefield of Hogwarts, moments after Voldemort casts the killing curse on Harry in the Forbidden Forest, is a place thick with smoke, blood, and dread. Among the Death Eaters stands Narcissa Malfoy, cold, elegant, composed, but inside her a storm rages, for she is no longer the woman who once watched Muggleborns tortured at dinner tables. The woman who kneels beside Harry's body is not the same Narcissa who flanked the Dark Lord out of obligation and fear. She is a mother, and in this moment nothing else matters. When she bends over Harry, checking if he is dead as Voldemort commands, she doesn't feel the icy pride of a loyal follower. She feels something else, defiance wrapped in love. Her hand trembles slightly as it brushes against Harry's chest. She feels breath. He is alive. And her heart does something it hasn't done in years. It tightens with hope, but not for Harry. For Draco Malfoy, her only son, is somewhere within the chaos of this war-torn castle. She does not know if he is dead or alive. She does not know if he is hurt, alone, or hunted. All she knows is that the one person she has sworn to protect since his first breath might still be reachable. And now she has something the Dark Lord does not, the truth. She leans close to Harry's ear, her whisper, meant only for him. Is Draco alive? Is he in the castle? Harry whispers back, yes. And just like that, everything changes. The lie she tells Voldemort next is not for heroism or rebellion. It is not for Harry Potter. It is not for the side of good. It is for her son. When she rises and tells Voldemort he is dead, she commits a quiet betrayal that ripples louder than any battle cry. This moment is more than a twist in a war story. It is the climax of the Malfoys' hidden transformation. For 7 books, they were symbols of aristocratic cruelty, of entitlement soaked in prejudice. But behind the veil of their pure blood pride, something human had been growing. Narcissa's decision to lie is not just the saving of Harry's life, it is the saving of Draco's soul, and perhaps unknowingly, the beginning of the Malfoys' redemption. It's important to remember that Narcissa was never officially a Death Eater. She bore no dark mark. She was not like her sister Bellatrix, intoxicated by cruelty and madness, nor was she like her husband Lucius, eager for proximity to power. Narcissa was colder, more silent, but her silence was not allegiance, it was survival, and her loyalties never belonged to Voldemort. They belonged to her family. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, we see the first cracks in the Malfoy family's devotion to the Dark Lord. When Draco is given the impossible task of killing Dumbledore, Narcissa does not rejoice. She panics. She seeks out Severus Snape, begs him for help, and extracts from him the unbreakable vow. If Draco should fail, will you yourself carry out the deed the Dark Lord has ordered Draco to perform? She asks. That moment is not cowardice, it is desperate courage, a mother trying to shield her son from a war he was never prepared to fight. Draco, by then, has begun to unravel. The pressure of his task, murder, punishment, threats to his family, pulls him apart. He becomes pale, withdrawn, shaken. And yet no help comes from the Dark Lord who gave him the task. Voldemort has no concern for Draco's welfare. To him, the boy is expendable, a pawn to punish Lucius. But to Narcissa he is everything. She watches as her child loses his innocence and trembles beneath a burden too heavy for his narrow shoulders. It is here that her true feelings begin to take form. Not just love, but the slow awakening to a truth. The Dark Lord does not protect, he only uses. When the Malfoys return in the Deathly Hallows, they are shadows of their former selves. Lucius is disgraced, stripped of wand and status. Narcissa stands tall but wary. The fear in their home is now thick and permanent. The family has fallen from grace, and Voldemort's presence in their mansion is not a privilege, it is a threat. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione are captured and brought to Malfoy Manor, Draco hesitates to identify them. "I can't be sure," he says, and his voice is weak. His defiance is subtle, but it is there. He does not want to condemn anyone, not anymore. In that same scene, it is Narcissa who tries to maintain control, who looks down at the battered trio and tries to assess the situation. Bellatrix rages, Lucius begs, Draco hides, but Narcissa observes. She is watching the tides turn, and something in her has shifted. The family is no longer chasing the dream of power, they are desperate to survive. The culmination of this shift arrives in the Forbidden Forest when she sees Harry breathing. She could call out, could offer Voldemort his enemy alive, regain her status, secure protection. But she doesn't. Because she knows Voldemort cannot be trusted, not with Harry's life and not with Draco's. The only path forward, the only chance for her son to come home alive, is to let Harry live and let the lie breathe. "Is he alive, Draco?" she asks Harry in a whisper that is less a question and more a plea. That whisper and Harry's answer unlocks something powerful inside her. She rises, her voice steady, and delivers the lie that will ultimately bring about Voldemort's fall. He is dead. It is the most important sentence she ever speaks. In the film, this moment passes quickly. Narcissa asks her question, lies to Voldemort, and the story moves on. But in the book, this moment is a tectonic shift. It is the moment when a woman, long silent and passive, takes control. Her motivations are personal, not political. But that is precisely what makes it so powerful. It is not prophecy or prophecy breaker that saves Harry. It is a mother's love, and not his own. J.K. Rowling wrote she no longer trusted that Voldemort would ever honor any promise to keep her son safe. This line, tucked quietly into the narrative, explains everything. Narcissa's lie is not noble. It is maternal. And that is what makes it pure. It is the triumph of love over fear, not the love of a hero for the world, but the love of a mother for her child. It is small, selfish, and utterly human. And yet it changes the course of the war. Because Harry lives, he returns to defeat Voldemort. Because Narcissa lies, she allows the resistance to regroup. And because the Malfoys choose their family over their allegiance, they survive the fall of the regime. In the final pages of the book, as the battle ends and silence falls, the Malfoys do not fight. They do not curse. They walk away together. The Malfoys did not linger to fight, but made their way swiftly through the crowd and disappeared. This line is not a condemnation. It is a quiet farewell to a family who chose, finally, not power, but peace. They are not heroes, but they are no longer villains. Draco, too, is saved, not just physically, but morally. The boy who once taunted Muggleborns and dreamt of glory now walks away with his parents, older and wiser. He has seen cruelty, he has seen cowardice, he has seen what it means to be used. And in his mother's lie, he has seen love. Years later, on platform 934, he stands alone, watching his son board the train to Hogwarts. He does not sneer, he does not gloat, he simply nods to Harry. The war is over, and though they stand on different paths, they both understand what it means to have risked everything for a child. That nod is the echo of a lie told in a forest, one that saved not just a life, but a family. The Malfoys' arc is not about redemption in the traditional sense. They are not honored. They do not fight bravely or die for a cause, but their redemption is real. It is slow, quiet, and deeply personal. It is the kind that begins not with ideology, but with a mother's whispered question. In the end, the story of Narcissa Malfoy is not about darkness or allegiance. It is about choice. A choice made in the shadows, born of love, that changes the fate of a war. She does not wear a crown of laurels, but she walks away with her son alive. And in that she wins. Number 27. Draco knows Harry's identity, but keeps silent. In the dim, suffocating halls of Malfoy Manor, something shifted. Not just the power dynamics of a crumbling war or the terror that hovered in the air like fog, but something within Draco Malfoy himself. The boy who once relished his place in the world, rich, pure-blooded, smug, now stood paralyzed in a grand room where screams were currency and silence was survival. It was in this house, his childhood home turned headquarters of Voldemort's Death Eaters, that Draco came face to face with a moment that would forever mark the ambiguity of his character. And it began when 3 prisoners were dragged before the family. Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger had been caught by snatchers and brought to the very place they most feared. But Harry, ever a target, had been disfigured by a stinging hex, so grotesquely altered that even those who had known him intimately might have struggled to identify him. Yet when the snatchers expressed uncertainty, Lucius Malfoy, desperate for redemption in the eyes of the Dark Lord, demanded clarity. "Draco, come here. Look properly. What do you think? Is it Harry Potter?" Those were Lucius's words, piercing through the air like knives, more a command than a question. He was clawing back his former power, a man who once dined with ministers now grovelling at Voldemort's feet, and he hoped delivering Harry Potter would return him to favour. All eyes turned to Draco, and Draco hesitated. The moment is brief in the film, a flicker of hesitation on screen, but in the pages of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows the moment is pregnant with unspoken truth. Rowling does not scream it aloud, she lets it throb quietly beneath the surface. Draco was looking at Harry as though he were not sure he was really seeing him. This line holds multitudes. It is not that Draco cannot recognize Harry. He knows who stands before him. They have shared too many years of rivalry, too many scathing glances across classrooms and Quidditch fields. Draco knows Harry by posture, by presence, by the electric tension that follows him like a cloak. So why doesn't he say it? The truth is complicated, but it's in this moment that Draco's arc reaches a silent crescendo. He doesn't shout, "It's Potter!" He doesn't offer the information that could restore his family's standing. He stands on the edge, not helping, but not condemning. In a war where allegiance is currency, Draco chooses neither side. It is a strange, liminal space, and in that space, his silence becomes a small act of resistance. Let's remember what the Malfoy Manor has become by this point in the story. Once a grand estate of proud aristocrats, it now hosts screams from its dungeons and bears the chilling presence of Voldemort's snake, Nagini. Bellatrix Lestrange, unhinged and fanatical, rules its halls with cruel delight. To speak against Voldemort in this place is to invite death, not just for oneself, but for one's family. Draco has grown up in this manor, but it is no longer his home. It has been invaded, corrupted. His mother, Narcissa, walks its corridors like a ghost. Lucius, stripped of confidence, watches events with desperation, and Draco, barely 17, thrust into a war he didn't choose, is expected to pass judgment. This wasn't the first time Draco had been asked to walk the line between cowardice and courage. The sixth book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, had already shown him unraveling. Tasked with killing Dumbledore, Draco had cracked under the weight. He had cried in bathrooms, hesitated on tower tops, and ultimately lowered his wand when the time came to strike. It was Snape who carried out the act, but everyone, even Voldemort, knew Draco had failed. And yet here he was again, faced with a decision. But this time it was quieter. No one expected Draco to cast a curse or spill blood. He simply had to name Harry Potter, to say yes, to point, and he couldn't do it. This hesitation is not nothing. It's not a fluke, not a misstep. It is a choice. Rowling describes it as such. Draco's expression was full of reluctance, even fear. It is fear, yes, but not only for himself. He is afraid of what naming Harry means, that by doing so, he aligns himself irreversibly with the very people who have turned his home into a prison, that he validates their cruelty, their madness, that he becomes them. What's extraordinary is that Draco could have saved himself. He had every reason to shout, "It's him," to claim the glory, to be done with it, to earn the Dark Lord's favor. He could have done it for his mother, for his father, but he didn't. He looked into the bruised and swollen face of a boy he once hated, and he stayed silent. It's not an act of heroism in the traditional sense. Draco doesn't grab a wand and duel Bellatrix. He doesn't throw open the doors and declare, "Harry Potter is under my protection." He simply refuses to confirm. He buys them time, just enough time, because the delay allows Dobby the house elf to arrive. It allows the chaos of their escape to unfold. And though Draco doesn't raise a finger to help, his inaction becomes a shield. There's a powerful irony in that. In the end, Draco saves Harry not by acting, but by not acting. In a world driven by force and violence, it is his hesitation or his inability to condemn that tips the scales. This moment is so layered, so full of quiet rebellion, that it almost goes unnoticed. It is not a grand gesture. But in the moral economy of Deathly Hallows, it is a pivotal crack in the wall. Draco is no longer the boy who strutted through Hogwarts, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle, sneering at Muggle-borns. He is no longer the pampered son of a proud Death Eater. He is something else, something broken, uncertain, but redeemable. Later, when Hogwarts becomes the final battleground, Draco again finds himself caught between duty and decency. He searches for Harry in the Room of Requirement, but not with the same venom. When the room catches fire and collapses around him, it is Harry who saves him. Twice. And though Draco never says thank you, that unspoken debt becomes the final knot in their twisted history. Harry doesn't save him because they're friends. He saves him because he understands what Draco has done. Because in that drawing room, under the cold gaze of his family, Draco made a choice. Small, silent, but real. It is a moment that speaks volumes about the grey zones of war. Not everyone becomes a hero in the light. Some characters, like Draco, find their redemption in shadows. He never becomes a member of the Order. He doesn't fight beside Harry or march in Dumbledore's army, but he stops being a villain, and that is no small thing. Years later, in the epilogue, we see Draco again, older, calmer, standing on platform 9 3/4. He nods to Harry. It is not a warm gesture, but it is something. A quiet acknowledgement that once, in a house full of darkness, Draco had the chance to be cruel and chose not to be. And maybe that's enough. What makes this scene so compelling is how Rowling resists the urge to explain it away. She doesn't insert a monologue or spell it out in capital letters. She lets Draco's silence speak, and in a series so full of noise, of duels and prophecies and speeches, that silence is deafening. In many ways, Draco's arc is not about redemption so much as it is about recognition. He recognizes Harry, he recognizes evil. He recognizes in that instant who he does not want to be, and even though he doesn't have the strength to oppose it outright, he plants his feet He refuses to move, and that refusal and that breathless pause becomes his defiance. There is a line in the book that often gets overlooked. Draco did nothing to help. On the surface, it sounds like condemnation. But beneath it lies the truth. Draco also did nothing to harm. In a war where every decision is a blade, neutrality is a razor's edge. What Draco did in that room may not have won the war. It may not have earned him applause or absolution. But in that stillness, he carved a sliver of light into a house drowning in shadows. And in the end, sometimes that's what courage looks like. Not the roar, but the refusal. Not the spell, but the silence. Would you like me to continue with another scene or character moment? Number 28. Malfoy's failure in his first potions lesson. It began in the shadowy underground depths of Hogwarts, a dungeon classroom steeped in the scent of damp stone and dried herbs, the walls lined with pickled creatures and dusty bottles. This was the realm of Professor Severus Snape, and the occasion was the very first potions class for the new first years. The atmosphere was dense with anticipation and unease. For Harry Potter, this moment was already tense, and for Draco Malfoy, it should have been his chance to shine. He had, after all, grown up in a world where names like his opened doors and whispered privilege. Yet, something unexpected unraveled in that first lesson. Snape, robed in black and gliding between the rows like a living shadow, zeroed in on Harry almost immediately. "Ah, yes," he said silkily, "our new celebrity." The sarcasm dripped from every word. It was not a moment of welcome, but of scrutiny. Snape peppered Harry with rapid-fire questions about Bezoars, Wolfsbane, and Monkshood. Harry, raised by muggles, had no answers. The tension rose like mist from a simmering cauldron. Draco Malfoy, seated comfortably among his fellow Slytherins, smirked with satisfaction. Snape's favoritism was palpable. It wrapped around Draco like a cloak. There was no doubt which side the professor stood on. One might have expected that this combination, favour from the teacher, familiarity with magical ingredients, and the comfort of Slytherin company, would translate into dazzling academic performance. But the reality was surprisingly more mundane. While Harry sat bewildered and visibly frustrated under Snape's cold stare, Draco was given space to operate undisturbed. Yet when it came time to actually brew the potion, boil cure, a relatively simple assignment, his results were unimpressive. J.K. Rowling notes almost in passing that Draco's potion looked no better than anyone else's. It was an understated observation, yet it spoke volumes. Despite his confidence and aristocratic background, Draco didn't demonstrate the flair one might expect of a pure blood raised with every advantage. The comparison between the two boys becomes more poignant when seen in the context of what follows in later books. Harry, initially floundering in potions, grows under the guidance of a mysterious benefactor, the half-blood prince. With annotated instructions and unorthodox techniques scribbled in the margins of his borrowed textbook, Harry's results improve dramatically. He earns Snape's grudging acknowledgement and even Slughorn's praise. Draco, on the other hand, remains flat. His ambition is evident, but the skill does not match. This divergence underscores a deeper message woven into the series. Heritage and favoritism are not substitutes for talent or perseverance. Draco Malfoy was not lazy. He was meticulous in his self-presentation, quick with sarcasm, and attentive to his social standing. But brewing potions is an art of detail, intuition, and creativity, qualities that are difficult to fake and harder to teach. His potion-making remained methodical but uninspired. Snape's classroom, a place of sharp edges and quiet pressure, served as a crucible for more than potions. It tested character. In singling out Harry and ignoring Draco's mediocrity, Snape unknowingly highlighted the core difference between the two students. Harry, despite being unfairly targeted, absorbed the craft. He observed, he experimented, and eventually he thrived. Draco, even with every structural advantage, never transcended the formulaic. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Slughorn notes Harry's impressive potion skills and asks if Lily Potter taught him. Harry says no, and Slughorn replies, "You must have inherited her knack then." It's a subtle nod to natural talent, yes, but also to effort and engagement. Harry applied what he read in the prince's book not as rote instruction, but as insight. He internalized knowledge, not just replicated it. Contrast that with Draco's performance, which remains stagnant across the years. In Chamber of Secrets, Draco boasts in the dueling club, throws around his weight in social circles, but potions class never becomes his stage. Even in Half-Blood Prince, when potions becomes a more advanced and subtle art, Draco never excels. He is preoccupied, of course, with darker missions, but his lack of earlier foundational success suggests this was not a sudden decline, it was the norm. The theme resonates: reputation does not brew success. The son of Lucius Malfoy, Draco walks into Hogwarts wrapped in the trappings of expectation. He believes, perhaps, that proximity to power equals power itself, but potions requires more than confidence, the ability to listen, to sense, to question and refine. These were skills that came to Harry only when he was freed from intimidation and offered a secret window into the mind of someone who truly understood the subject. The irony, of course, is that the Half-Blood Prince was Snape himself. The man who ridiculed Harry in his early days was the very same whose notes transformed him into a star pupil. The prince's annotations encourage curiosity and autonomy, something Harry had always possessed beneath his uncertainty. Draco, ironically, had no such guidance. He had access to Snape's approval, but not to Snape's genius. In that first potions lesson, the seeds were sown. Harry's humiliation masked the first signs of independent thinking. Draco's ease concealed his inability to move beyond instructions. One had the drive to rise, the other the assumption that he already stood atop. Rowling masterfully allows this to unfold subtly, not through pronouncements, but through the quiet facts of classroom performance. In Sorcerer's Stone, Neville Longbottom's accident causes chaos in the room. Snape blames Harry for the mess. Draco grins. Yet not once does Snape redirect the lesson to reward Malfoy's skills, because there is little to reward. It's not malice, it's simply the truth. Malfoy never distinguishes himself in potions the way Hermione does through diligence, or the way Harry does through experimentation. His talent lies elsewhere, or perhaps it never lay anywhere to begin with. Even Hermione's success is a stark contrast. She does not enjoy Snape's favor, yet she consistently brews the correct potion, follows instructions to the letter, and often knows the theory better than anyone. She does not have the prince's textbook. She does not receive grace from her teacher, yet she excels. This too highlights Draco's mediocrity. If brilliance could be summoned by effort alone, he had years to prove it. The classroom dynamic also speaks to deeper social commentary. The wizarding world, particularly among the pure-blood elite, places undue weight on lineage. The assumption that magical talent follows bloodlines is repeatedly challenged. Draco's potions failures quietly deflate the myth. In contrast, Hermione, Muggle-born, rises effortlessly through her competence, and Harry, half-blood, thrives only when he is allowed to learn on his own terms. There's a poetic justice to the fact that the person Snape tried hardest to belittle, Harry, ended up mastering the very subject Snape once ruled with an iron glare. And the boy Snape favored, protected, and subtly encouraged, Draco, never became an alchemist of note. The magic of potions, like the magic of destiny itself, resists control. It flows not from privilege, but from potential. Even in the moments where Draco seeks attention, such as mocking Neville or ridiculing Ron, he never does so by demonstrating his own mastery. He undermines others but doesn't elevate himself. His confidence is brittle, dependent on a system of status that the potions classroom doesn't recognize. The cauldron doesn't care about surnames. It rewards precision and patience, qualities that Harry, by year 6, develops in secret. This quiet academic storyline parallels the greater narrative arc of the series. The war between Voldemort and the Order, the battle between prejudice and courage, is mirrored in the microcosm of the classroom. Potions, deceptively still and silent, is where we first see the outline of who these boys truly are. One learns, the other poses. One stumbles and rises, the other floats and sinks. By the time we reach the final books, Draco's limitations have become more than academic. He is a reluctant Death Eater, a pawn burdened by expectations. And Harry, tempered by trials, leads the charge against darkness. Their first potions class was not just a lesson, it was a prophecy, and it whispered not with grandeur, but with a simple observation. Talent reveals itself over time, not through applause, but through persistence. So the cauldron boiled, Snape's robes billowed, the ingredients danced through the air. But what remained, after the fumes had cleared, was not Draco's triumph, but Harry's quiet beginning. A beginning that, years later, would brew more than potions. It would brew fate,